Her son's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, and he immediately raised a hand to summon a translucent long saber, which he slashed toward the golden hand with vicious force. A crisp clang rang out, and a burst of piercing golden light erupted as soon as its blade struck the furry hand. The treasure then immediately exploded, and the young man was forced back several steps in succession from the resulting backlash. He threw up a mouthful of blood essence, then collapsed to the ground and was unable to stand up again. I've already cast a restriction around this place, so no one will hear you no matter how much you yell. You sure are daring to have captured this Taoist priest despite being aware that he has a powerful backer. Did you really think I wouldn't dare to retrieve him just because the Long family is involved? The frosty male voice rang out again. Immediately thereafter, spatial fluctuations erupted, and a golden figure appeared in the room. This was a golden demonic ape that was around 30 to 40 feet tall, wearing a suit of silver armor. The demonic ape had a pair of blue eyes and a mouthful of menacing fangs. An extremely ferocious aura erupted from his body, and there was also black baleful chi swirling around him, presenting a very menacing sight to behold. "You're a demonic cultivator, how could this be?" the elderly man exclaimed. A hint of astonishment also appeared in the woman's eyes, as she struggled to keep them from rolling back into her head. "Hee, why are you so surprised? Seeing as you clearly have a death wish, I'll send you on your way." A vicious light flashed through the golden ape's eyes, and golden light erupted from the fingers that were locked around the elderly woman's throat as Han Li prepared to snap her neck. "No, Senior. Stop." The elderly man and his son both yelled out to try and stop Han Li, but they had both been rendered completely powerless by Han Li's attacks and could only look on in horror and despair. A look of despair also appeared in the elderly woman's eyes when all of a sudden, a cold voice rang out from outside the room. "You're also quite daring to infiltrate my territory and kill my descendants." As soon as the voice trailed off, a resounding boom rang out from up above, following which a huge purple hand that was around 10 feet in size tore through the roof. The hand had countless runes swirling around it, and it broke through the restriction that Han Li had set up before grabbing viciously toward the giant golden ape's head. Eccentric long. The golden ape's expression abruptly changed as he let loose a low snarl, casting the elderly woman aside before reaching up with a hand of his own. His golden palm swelled rapidly in size to directly oppose the giant purple hand, and at the same time, he made a grabbing motion toward the puppet-like Qi Lingzi with his other hand. Boom! An earth-shattering boom erupted as a massive ball of golden and purple light appeared in the room, and the enormous spiritual pressure erupting from the clash instantly laid waste to the room's roof and walls. A cold harumph rang out from within the dazzling spiritual light, following which a golden figure sprang forth and reappeared over 1,000 feet away in the blink of an eye. "You think you can get away?" the owner of the purple hand roared in a cold voice, following which a streak of purple light shot forth in pursuit of the golden figure, and the former was even faster than the latter. Such a massive commotion had naturally alerted all of the people in the entire fortress, and countless streaks of light rose up into the air from all directions to see what was happening. In the blink of an eye, the golden figure and purple streak of light had rushed out of the city walls and flown into the white mist outside. By the time many of the Long family's cultivators arrived at the edge of the mist, a string of explosions were already taking place within the murky white mist. Immediately thereafter, a series of roars and enraged cries rang out, and two bursts of astonishing spiritual pressure erupted from within the sea of mist, causing the illusionary formation up above, which was simulating the sky, to warp and twist violently. The two bursts of spiritual pressure seemed to be evenly matched, and all of the nearby Long family cultivators couldn't help but exchange astonished glances with one another. They were naturally already aware that one of the people in the mist was none other than their patriarch, yet the other person still managed to hold their own. Could it be that this was another late body integration stage being? In that case, deity transformation and spatial tempering cultivators like them would essentially be committing suicide if they were to rush into the mist to join the battle. The Long family cultivators were led by none other than their family leader, who was the purple-robed middle-aged man. He was staring into the sea of mist with a shocked and enraged look on his face, but he was also quite hesitant to join the battle as he sensed the enormous spiritual pressure emanating from within the mist. Family leader Long, would you like me to step in to separate them?" A pleasant female voice suddenly rang out from behind the Long family leader. The purple-robed man's heart jolted upon hearing this, and he immediately turned around to find a beautiful yellow-robed woman who appeared to be around 17 to 18 years of age. The woman was standing behind him and appraising him with a faint smile. If Han Li were present on the scene, he would immediately be able to identify this woman as the vastly renowned Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns of the artifact spirit race. The purple-robed man was slightly skeptical toward the yellow-robed woman's motives, but he feigned an elated expression and hurriedly said, "Senior Thousand Autumns, it would naturally be brilliant news for us if you could step in to help my father capture the man." "Capture him? I can't do that. Even if I were willing to, I may not be able to. Besides, I may be on good terms with your Long family, but I certainly can't just offend another body integration cultivator for your sake. All I can do is to separate them and end this battle," Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns said with a smile. The Long family leader hesitated momentarily before agreeing. "That would suffice as well. My father has expended some energy while taking care of some matters a few days ago, so it wouldn't be ideal for him to fight a powerful enemy at a time like this." "All right, in that case it looks like I won't have to step in after all." Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns cast her gaze into the sea of mist as a slightly grim look appeared on her face. "What do you mean by that, sea?" The purple-robed man faltered slightly upon hearing this, yet before he could even fully articulate his question, the ground near the entire fortress suddenly tremored violently. Immediately thereafter, an earth-shattering boom erupted within the sea of mist, followed by a sharp screech. A burst of violent golden and purple energy surged forth from within the sea of mist, blowing all of the mist away before sweeping directly toward the Long family cultivators. This immediately sent the Long family cultivators into a panic, and those with weaker cultivation bases hurriedly fell back to seek refuge behind the city wall. Meanwhile, the high-grade cultivators who were at the spatial tempering stage all released protective treasures to shield themselves, and also retreated a few steps to a safer distance away. Only Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns allowed the energy to sweep over her while remaining completely still on the spot. However, her smile had already faded and had been replaced with a grim expression. All of the white mist was eradicated by the eruption of energy, and only then were the two figures in the distance revealed to everyone. One of them was a mountainous golden ape that was over 300 feet tall, and it was holding a Taoist priest in one hand, while its other hand was clenched into a tight, menacing fist. The normal-sized humanoid figure before the giant ape was none other than the Long family patriarch. At this point, a pair of golden dragon horns had appeared on his head, and golden scales had emerged on the sides of his face. Even his pupils had taken on a shimmering golden color, and just like the ape, he wasn't wielding any weapons either. The ground that the two of them were standing on was filled with craters of different sizes, having clearly been severely ravaged by their battle. As expected of a late body integration cultivator from the number 1 true spirit family, to think that you can contend with me using nothing more than your physical body. However, you won't be able to prevent me from getting away," the giant golden ape roared. "Who are you? From what I know, there are no other ape-type demonic cultivators who have reached the body integration stage aside from that Taoist master Yellow Brow," the Long family patriarch asked in an expressionless manner. You can speculate about who I am in your own time. Seeing as you've stepped in person, I'll let those people live. However, if the same thing happens again, don't blame me for putting an end to them," the giant ape roared in a menacing voice. Immediately thereafter, a layer of shimmering silver flames appeared over its body, and it crashed toward the air nearby. A sputtering sound rang out as the space there was melted by the silver flames, revealing a black hole. The giant ape vanished into the black hole in a flash, and the Long family patriarch made no effort to intervene. He merely remained on the spot and stared at the rapidly shrinking black hole, seemingly in deep thought about something. Only then did the purple-robed man hurriedly approach him in a respectful manner, along with the Long family elders. "Are you all right, father?" "HMPH, of course I am. Do you think that ape is capable of harming me?" the Long family patriarch replied in a cold voice. "That's certainly not what I was implying. I was merely slightly concerned as you had even activated your half-dragon body, father," the purple-robed man said in a respectful voice. The Long family patriarch suddenly asked in a cold voice, "You heard what that demonic cultivator said before he left, right? As the Long family leader, I presume you know something about this." "This matter concerns my sister, Lady Li. I was just about to report this to you, and I didn't think that such a powerful demonic cultivator would be involved, nor did I think that he would get here so quickly, the purple-robed man replied with a wry smile. Lady Li, is that the one who married someone outside our family? When did she get here? Forget it, tell me about it later, the Long family patriarch said in an implacable voice. The Long family leader hurriedly answered in a respectful manner. Even though he was the Long family leader and the son of this Long family patriarch, all of that ceased to matter ever since the patriarch had begun using that heartless Tao cultivation art, which had gradually rid him of all emotions. It was quite a treacherous task to be interacting with the Long family patriarch on a daily basis, and even as his son, the Long family leader didn't dare to let his guard down for a moment. Was that the half-dragon transformation granted by the true dragon bloodline? It really is quite an eye-opening experience for me to see you face a demonic cultivator on equal footing with just your physical body alone, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns said with a smile as she slowly flew over from afar. I'm a late body integration cultivator, yet I wasn't even able to take down that early body integration stage demonic cultivator. Am I supposed to be pleased with myself? Are you perhaps mocking me, Holy Maiden? The Long family patriarch asked in a cold voice. Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns was completely unfazed by the Long family patriarch's cold demeanor, and replied, He, of course not, fellow Taoist Long. As we all know, demonic cultivators are vastly renowned for their powerful bodies, and in particular, ape-type demonic cultivators excel in this area. I'm sure I don't need to elaborate to you why it's impressive that you were able to face a body integration stage ape-type demonic cultivator in direct battle with your physical body alone. If you had unleashed some other powerful abilities, you would have definitely been able to take down that demonic cultivator in a short time. If you truly think that, I'm afraid you're dead wrong, Holy Maiden, the Long family patriarch suddenly said with a peculiar cold smile. Oh, did you discover something during your fight earlier? Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns asked in a befuddled manner. Instead of replying to her question right away, the Long family patriarch turned to all of the nearby Long family cultivators and instructed, all of you go back for now. I wish to speak to fellow Taoist Thousand Autumns alone. At the same time, the dragon horns and scales on his head and face faded away, and his golden eyes also reverted back to their original black color. All of the Long family cultivators naturally answered in a respectful manner before flying back to the fortress together, leaving the Long family patriarch and Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns to converse on their own. From the precautionary measures that you're taking, I can't help but think that that demonic ape seems to be no ordinary being, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns remarked after everyone had departed. I suspect that he's from the Holy Island, the Long family patriarch said, and Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns was quite surprised to hear this. The Holy Island, isn't that the sacred realm shared by your human and demon races? She asked. That's right. Otherwise, it's very difficult to explain how that body integration stage demonic ape could have appeared in the demon race. Once every 1,000 years, the Holy Island would select bright young talents from our two races to replenish their ranks. Countless years have passed since the establishment of the Holy Island, and no one knows exactly how many body integration stage beings there are on the island, but I estimate that there will at least be 20 to 30 body integration stage beings there. Aside from when matters that concern the survival of our two races arise, the body integration stage beings living on the Holy Island are prohibited from leaving the island. It's exactly due to the existence of this island that our human and demon races have been able to survive in the spirit realm to this point, the Long family patriarch explained in a solemn manner. It sounds like your holy island is similar to the holy shrine of our spirit race. I'm also unaware of just how many Holy Spirit level beings there are in our holy shrine, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns sighed. After a brief silence, the Long family patriarch continued, there's also another reason behind my theory. According to my knowledge, the Holy Island is guarded by a demonic army, and one branch of that army is comprised of the extremely rare Vajra apes. That giant ape resembles a Vajra ape in appearance, and is far more powerful than the average early body integration cultivator. I didn't use any powerful abilities during that battle, but that giant ape definitely had more tricks up its sleeve as well. Even if I had fought with all my power, I'm still not confident that I would have been able to prevent that ape from escaping. On top of that, if he really is from the Holy Island, then that would be another reason why I wouldn't want to force the issue. Is that demonic ape really that fearsome? Without fighting it personally, it's difficult for me to accurately gauge its power, but the layer of silver flames it conjured up is able to melt through space, and I did feel very threatened by it, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns said as her smile finally faded. From what I've heard, the Vajra apes possess an innate ability known as the Nine Nascent True Flames. This is an extremely powerful innate ability, but very few Vajra apes actually manage to attain it and cultivate it to a formidable degree, so not many people are aware of just what those flames are like, the Long family patriarch said. So you're convinced that the golden ape is a Vajra ape? Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns asked with furrowed brows. It's most likely the case, the Long family patriarch replied in a confident manner. All right, seeing as that demonic cultivator is from the Holy Island, we'll just have to let bygones be bygones. Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns chuckled after a brief silence. HMPH, it's not that I'm afraid of the Vajra ape race. I simply don't want to cross the Holy Island. On top of that, from the ape's parting words, it seems that this attack wasn't entirely unprovoked, so I'll have to investigate this matter, the Long family patriarch said with a cold look in his eyes. I won't comment on your family's internal affairs, but regarding that other matter, we've already been talking for a day and a night, yet we still haven't arrived at a consensus. Are we going to keep up this stalemate? I've taken quite a risk to come here, and I have more things to do other than make contact with your Long family. Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns' expression also cooled as she spoke. Our Long family's conditions are quite simple, aren't they? As long as you're willing to provide 10 non-sentient waste spirits to our Long family for every arc, we're willing to split you a third of the giant Atlas arcs that we refine. Is that not a favorable enough exchange for your spirit race? According to my knowledge, you artifact spirit beings don't even view waste spirits as equals, so it should be a fantastic bargain for you to be able to exchange them for so many giant Atlas arcs. The Long family patriarch replied in a completely expressionless manner. HMPH, 10 is definitely out of the question. Our artifact spirit race does indeed look down on waste spirits, but according to the laws of the entire spirit race, passing waste spirits onto foreign races is a crime comparable to treason. We're willing to offer only 5 waste spirits per arc at most. On top of that, I'm taking a huge risk to facilitate this exchange with your Long family, yet you're only willing to offer a third of the giant Atlas arcs in return, so the risk and reward involved is completely skewed and disproportionate. Forgive me for being blunt, but if I had known from the beginning that the Long family would be so stingy, I would rather the blueprint fall into the hands of one of 3 sovereigns or 7 monarchs. I'm sure they'd be more generous and sincere than your Long family, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns said in an indifferent manner as she tucked a few stray strands of hair behind her ear. The Long family patriarch appraised Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns for a long while before finally speaking again. There's no need to try and goad me like this, fellow Taoist Thousand Autumns. I'm sure you're aware that the heartless Tao cultivation art I'm using has rid me of all emotional fallacies, so your mind games are futile. However, as a gesture of good faith, I'll make a compromise. We'll accept 8 waste spirits per arc, and we'll give your artifact spirit race 40% of all of the arcs that we refine. 40% and 8 waste spirits per arc. I can agree to the percentage share, but at most, I can only offer you 7 waste spirits per arc, Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns said in a cautious manner. All right, 7 it is then. Now that that's settled, we have to discuss our collaboration in preparation for the imminent devilish tribulation. The Long family patriarch agreed after a brief pause for contemplation. Holy Maiden Thousand Autumns was ecstatic to hear this, and a gorgeous smile appeared on her face. Of course, as long as the exchange can be smoothly facilitated, our artifact spirit race would be more than happy to continue working with your Long family. Please come with me then, Holy Maiden. This is not a good place to talk, so let's return to the tower, the Long family patriarch said as he made an inviting hand gesture. It was as if he had already completely forgotten about that giant golden ape. But then again, how could a brief interlude from an early body integration stage demonic ape compare in importance to the survival of the Long family during the devilish tribulation? Meanwhile, the golden ape had already descended on a completely deserted mountain tens of thousands of kilometers away. When it had used the silver flames to break through the restrictions around the immortal Welcome Palace, it had naturally alerted the guards in the palace. But by the time they had arrived on the scene, the ape had already vanished into the distance. The guards were only at the deity transformation and spatial tempering stages, so there was no way that they would be able to catch him. Letter 1D557, letter 1D563, letter 1D41E, letter 1D41E, letter 1D604, letter 1D41E. letter 1d680, letter 1d560, letter 1d696. As such, they merely set off in pursuit as a formality, despite knowing that their efforts would ultimately prove to be futile. After that, they sent some people to question some members of the Long family briefly, and they were stunned to hear that the perpetrator was a body integration stage demonic cultivator. As such, they could only turn a blind eye to the matter after doing some repairs. However, news of this body integration stage golden ape infiltrating the Long family's territory quickly spread like wildfire among the other body integration cultivators attending the convention, and many of them sent out their subordinates to investigate this matter, all to no avail. No one had ever heard of this giant golden ape before, and it had disappeared without a trace following the incident. This was quite frustrating to many people, and some of them also thought of the Holy Island. Of course, the giant golden ape was naturally unaware of all of this. At this moment, it was situated on the summit of a mountain, and after inspecting its surroundings, golden light flashed from its body, upon which it transformed into a young man with a set of ordinary facial features. This young man was naturally none other than Han Li. He had used the 1,000 transformation faces to adopt the appearance of a demonic ape and infiltrated the fortress. After that, he was discovered by the Long family patriarch, and he was forced to use his 12 awakening transformations, adopting his giant mountain ape form to clash with him. With his immensely powerful physical constitution, coupled with the enhancements he received from his 12 awakening transformations, he was naturally able to hold his own against the Long family patriarch. But at the same time, he was quite stunned by his opponent after the latter had adopted his half-dragon transformation. However, Han Li had only used around 50% to 60% of his power during the battle, and the Long family patriarch had also clearly held back. Otherwise, it was very likely that their battle would have demolished the entire immortal welcome palace. Han Li didn't know why the Long family patriarch had held back, but he was certainly more than happy to be allowed an easy escape. At this point, he was already too far away, and with the vast number of human and demonic beings on 9 Immortal Mountain, there was no way the Long family would be able to track him down. After reverting back to his true form, Han Li turned toward Qi Lingzi, who was still standing still on the spot like a wooden puppet, and he heaved a faint sigh. He then made a hand seal, and a streak of azure light shot forth before vanishing into Qi Lingzi's body in a flash. Qi Lingzi shuddered, and his wooden expression twisted before he let loose an involuntary moan. He then suddenly opened his mouth to expel a clump of black qi enveloped by a ball of azure light. A few moments later, Qi Lingzi's eyes regained their clarity, and as soon as he caught sight of Han Li, he asked in an elated manner, "Master, what are you doing here? Wasn't I abducted by some old woman?" It was quite clear that he recalled nothing of the ordeal that he had just suffered through. "HMPH, if I hadn't come after you, you would have ended up disabled and probably dead. I'll tell you what happened on the way back. Let's leave this place first." Han Li had no intention of disclosing too much here, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release a vast expanse of azure light, which swept up Qi Lingzi before Han Li flew away into the distance. As promised, Han Li gave Qi Lingzi a recount of everything that took place on their way back, and after learning about the extremely perilous ordeal that he had just suffered, Qi Lingzi fell completely silent, in stark contrast to his normal talkative and energetic nature. Han Li was rather surprised by this, yet just as he was wondering whether this disciple of his had finally learned the meaning of fear, he suddenly began to scream profanities at the top of his lungs, cursing the elderly woman and the Long family. He was so worked up that his cheeks had turned bright red, and spittle was flying from his mouth, looking as he had such a vendetta against the Long family that neither could live while the other survived. Li faltered initially upon seeing this before bursting into laughter. In the end, he said, "All right, that's enough. If you want to seek vengeance on the Long family, I won't stop you, but you have to become powerful enough to do so first. At this point, you're nothing more than a mere ant in the eyes of the Long family, and they can crush you with ease, so you have no right to challenge them. If you really want to stand up for yourself, then progress to the body integration stage first. Also, I don't want you to show your face in public anymore. After we get back, I'll teach you some cultivation arts and give you some treasures and pills. After this incident dies down, I'll send you and Hai Yueshan away from this place, and you two have to go to Deep Heaven City as quickly as possible. Once you get there, join the city guards for a few years first as training. The Long family is indeed quite powerful, but they're still wary of Deep Heaven City. After a few years, I'll go there to reunite with the two of you." "Are you sending me away, Master?" The Myriad Treasure Convention only commenced not long ago, and I came all this way, but I've barely even had a chance to see anything yet, Lingzi complained. HMPH, is the Myriad Treasure Convention more important, or is your life more important? I don't fear the Long family, but I certainly don't want to have to constantly worry about being attacked by them. What if you get abducted again? Do you expect me to save you from the Long family a second time? Han Li scolded. Lingzi recoiled slightly at the sight of Han Li's stern expression before reluctantly accepting this arrangement. All right, I'll do as you say then, master. Han Li naturally wasn't going to concern himself with whether his disciple was pleased with this decision or not. His expression eased slightly, and he gave a slight nod before falling silent. During the rest of the trip, Han Li didn't say anything further, and after over 2 hours, they returned to the Immortal Welcome Palace, where Hai Yueshan was eagerly awaiting their return. He was naturally ecstatic to see that Lingzi had been recovered safe and sound, and he hurriedly rushed toward Han Li before extending a deep bow. Yueshan, I recall that you found the person I'm looking for. Where is she right now? Han Li asked as soon as he sat down on the main seat, and the sudden question caught Hai Yueshan and Lingzi slightly off guard. Master, we found that demonic senior at a place known as the Heavenly Captivation Pavilion, and she invited you to meet her tomorrow at noon, Hai Yueshan replied in a respectful manner. All right, you two stay here and don't go anywhere for the next few days. I'll set up a powerful restriction formation nearby that'll stall even body integration cultivators who try to infiltrate this place. From tomorrow onward, you two can come visit me every night, and I'll give you some instructions in your cultivation. After things die down a little, you two can set off, Han Li said before departing and leaving his 2 disciples in the hall. Set off? What does master mean by that? Hai Yueshan was rather perplexed. It's a long story. I got screwed over by the Long family. Lingzi's face puckered up as if he had lost his most beloved treasure, while Hai Yueshan was still completely in the dark. The next day, Han Li spent an entire morning setting up an extremely powerful illusionary formation, then set off for the Heavenly Captivation Pavilion. According to Hai Yueshan, this pavilion was situated at the center of a cluster of small markets, all of which were temporary markets that had been set up by the major and minor powers of the human and demon races. The markets were all quite small, but one would often be surprised by what they could find there. There were all types of the most commonplace shops in each market, and some markets even had some specialty shops that specialize in selling wares unavailable in other stores. This Heavenly Captivation Pavilion was none other than one of those shops, and the only thing that it sold was a type of material known as Heavenly Captivation Stones. These stones weren't particularly rare or precious, but they were mandatory for setting up some illusionary formations, and it was often the case that a vast quantity of them would need to be used at once. Of course, these stones were split up into different grades, and the more powerful the formation, the higher the grade of the stones that was required. The Heavenly Captivation Pavilion was the only shop that sold top-grade Heavenly Captivation stones in bulk, so it was often frequented by many human and demonic cultivators. So this is the Heavenly Captivation Pavilion. Han Li stood in front of a row of bungalows and looked up at the sign hanging above one of them with a slightly speechless look on his face. Even so, Han Li naturally still strode directly into the building. As the exterior suggested, the interior wasn't very large, but it was very neat and tidy. Aside from 2 tables, a few chairs, and a long storage shelf, there were no other pieces of furniture. On top of that, there were no other wares being sold on the storage shelf, aside from some mundane-looking pieces of ore of different sizes. Behind one of the tables in front of the storage shelf sat a little girl with a pair of braids pointing directly upward. She appeared to be around 11 to 12 years of age, and was very adorable. She was in the process of playing around with her own little fingers in a bored manner when Han Li strode into the room. Ah, customer, would you like to buy some Heavenly Captivation Stones, senior? Which grade would you like and how many? We have all your Heavenly Captivation Stone needs here at the Heavenly Captivation Pavilion. The little girl immediately rose to her feet at the sight of Han Li before greeting him with a smile. Han Li swept his spiritual sense toward the little girl, upon which a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. The faint demonic chi emanating from this little girl's body indicated that she was clearly a demonic cultivator, and from her spiritual pressure fluctuations, he could tell that she was at the deity transformation stage. If anyone were to actually be fooled by her childish appearance, they were in for a huge surprise. I'm not here to buy stones, I'm here to meet someone, Han Li replied. The little girl faltered slightly upon hearing this before immediately extending a curtsy toward Han Li. Ah, it's Senior Han, right? My sister has been waiting for you in the backyard for a long time. Oh, you're her sister, Han Li asked in a slightly surprised voice. That's right, my name is Chin Mayer and I'm Saur's twin sister. I'll take you to see her right away, the little girl replied in an obedient manner. Please lead the way, Han Li nodded in response. Thus, Han Li was led into a side room, where there was a stone staircase that led underground. Not long after that, a hint of surprise appeared in Han Li's eyes as he discovered that there were several underground levels here, each of which was quite different from the other levels, and there were even some demonic men and women walking around on those levels. It was no wonder that the building was so small, most of it was underground. As Han Li was marveling at the sight around him, he was led to a certain hall on the lowest underground level, where an exquisite beauty in a white dress was waiting for him with a smile on her face. As soon as Han Li saw this woman, he felt as if his head had been struck by a bolt of lightning, and he exclaimed, "Wanner, how did you end up here?" "Wait, you're not Wanner." Han Li then immediately sensed that something was amiss, and his expression instantly darkened. "I'm truly surprised that you're the human senior who recently progressed to the body integration stage, fellow Taoist Han. Looks like my captivation technique is completely ineffective on you." The woman who was identical to Nangong Wan in appearance chuckled, and a layer of white qi abruptly surfaced over her face. After the white qi dissipated, she had completely transformed into another woman, who was still quite beautiful, but looked nothing like Nangong Wan. "Were you trying to test me, Chin Sar?" Han Li's dark expression didn't ease at all upon seeing this, and he appraised the woman in a cold manner. "Of course not. I wouldn't dare to do that, Senior. It's just that I've only just cultivated this great captivation technique, and I'm still unable to fully control it. Please forgive me for any offense I may have caused," the woman hurriedly explained. Great captivation technique. I've heard of this ability. It's a powerful innate ability of the heavenly fox race that can disguise one as the person closest to the beholder's heart. This must mean that you're a heavenly fox being. What connection do you bear with the heavenly fox monarch? Han Li asked as his expression eased slightly. My sister and I are indeed heavenly fox beings. We are related to the heavenly fox monarch, but only on a very distant basis, Chin Sar said as she extended a respectful curtsy before inviting Han Li to take a seat. Your great captivation technique had to have been enhanced by the restrictions around this place for it to have worked momentarily on me, right? Han Li chuckled as he took a seat. Letter 1D487, letter 1D667, letter 1D658, letter 1D4E, letter 1D500, letter 1D4E. Letter 1D658, letter 1D490, letter 1D4AT. Jinsar was quite surprised that Han Li was able to glean the function of the restrictions set up here so quickly, and she gained some admiration for him as a result. You have a sharp, discerning eye, Senior. Indeed, this is a shop set up by our heavenly fox race, and we've set up a few special formations within it. The formations won't be able to enhance other abilities, but they can indeed significantly bolster the efficacy of captivation and illusionary techniques. If we had met outside this shop, you most likely wouldn't have been fooled even for a single instant. It wasn't all that difficult to identify that restrictions had been set up in this shop, but for him to be able to determine that these restrictions could enhance the great captivation technique indicated that he had extensive knowledge and expertise in the art of formations himself. According to the circulating rumors, Han Li had to have encountered some kind of miraculous opportunity in the primordial world to have reached the body integration stage in just a few centuries. So it was quite remarkable that he had still managed to become this adept in the art of formations despite those difficult circumstances. Thus, the hint of skepticism and disdain that the woman had harbored toward Han Li as someone who had merely been outrageously lucky naturally immediately vanished. All right, I heard from my disciple that you agreed to meet me here today, so I presume you've prepared the things I want. Please bring them out. Han Li was still slightly annoyed that she had taken on Nangong Wan's appearance to test him, but he set that matter aside and cut straight to the chase. Of course, after returning to our demon race, I've secured most of the ingredients you requested through various avenues, and I'm sure you'll be pleased with what I've gathered. Mayor, bring out everything for Senior Han. I had to take care of some troublesome business recently, so I entrusted everything to my sister as a precautionary measure. Chin Sar nodded in response before turning to the little girl, then back to Han Li. Yes, Sister Sar. The little girl immediately replied before opening her mouth to expel a faint yellow translucent bead that was only around the size of an egg. Han Li was slightly taken aback to see this. The demon beast materials you requested are relatively taboo items among us demonic cultivators, so we stored them in this special bead rather than an ordinary storage bracelet. This is a half-Yumi treasure that a senior of our race failed to refine, but it has far greater storage capacity compared to normal storage treasures, and it can also be refined directly into one's body, so it's quite secure and discreet, Chin Sar explained with a smile. A half-Yumi treasure, that's quite rare. An intrigued look appeared on Han Li's face as he raised a hand before making a grabbing motion to draw the bead into his grasp. At the same time, a serious look appeared on his face, and he injected a wisp of his spiritual sense into the bead. In doing so, he discovered that it was filled with all types of precious demon beast materials that were piled up into a small mountain. There were also some other containers that were undoubtedly carrying some more valuable materials, presumably including things like the inner cores of high-grade demon beasts. With Han Li's powerful spiritual sense, he was naturally able to assess everything in an instant, and even the items in the containers were tallied in the blink of an eye. You've indeed gathered most of the items on my list. I must say, I'm very impressed, Han Li said as a smile finally appeared on his face. I certainly can't take all the credit, Senior. I contacted some good friends from other races, and it took all of us an enormous amount of time and effort to just barely track down all of these items, Chin Sar said with a wry smile. In any case, you fulfilled your end of the agreement, so I certainly won't go back on my word. Please examine these myriad-year spirit medicines and see if there'll be sufficient compensation, Han Li said with a pleased nod before flipping a hand over to produce a faint red storage bracelet, then tossing it toward Chin Sar with a flick of his wrist. Chin Sar's eyes lit up as she raised a hand to draw the storage bracelet into her grasp, then carefully injected her spiritual sense into it. Meanwhile, Han Li began to transfer the demon beast materials from the bead into his storage bracelet without any hesitation. Chin Mayer pouted slightly upon seeing this, but she didn't dare to say anything to stop him. It was quite clear that she felt Han Li to be too overbearing in transferring the items before her sister had even finished verifying the spirit medicines. However, the demon race respected power even more so than the human race, and Han Li was a body integration cultivator, so she could only swallow her complaints. Thankfully, Chin Sar finished her examination very quickly, and after withdrawing her spiritual sense from the storage bracelet, a hint of elation intermingled with bewilderment appeared on her face. Thank you, Senior Han. I noticed that there are more myriad-year spirit medicines in here than what we initially agreed on. May I ask what your intentions are, Senior? She asked in a hesitant manner. Instead of answering her question, Han Li asked in a calm manner, Fellow Taoist Qin, are you aware of the tribulation that's about to befall our two races within the next 1,000 years? Chin Sar's expression changed drastically upon hearing this, and only after a while did she murmur, Are you referring to the devilish tribulation, Senior Han? So you're already aware of this. Indeed, the devilish tribulation is imminent, and in order to ensure self-preservation, everyone aware of this information is doing everything they can to accumulate more power. In a short time, there will most likely be a severe shortage of spirit medicines and materials among our two races. As a precautionary measure, I plan to continue our deal. You and I can continue to exchange for items that we need prior to the devilish tribulation, but next time, I'll be asking for other things that can only be found in the demon race outside of demon beast materials, Han Li said in a serious manner. I only unintentionally stumbled upon this information about the devilish tribulation during the past few days. As for continuing our exchange, I would certainly love to. If you need anything, you can go directly to any of the shops opened by the Heavenly Fox race in Deep Heaven City and leave me a message there. For now, I'll be taking these spirit medicines. Thank you again, Senior. Chin Sar agreed without any hesitation. No matter how many myriad-year spirit medicines she obtained, the supply would be exhausted in a very short time. A main contributing factor behind her rate of cultivation progression lay in the myriad-year spirit medicines that Han Li had provided her with in the past, so she was ecstatic that Han Li was proposing to continue their exchange. All right, I won't stay here for any longer then. I wish you luck in finding what you need during the rest of the Myriad Treasure Convention. Seeing as everything had been said and done, Han Li had no intention of lingering any longer and stood up to take his leave. The Qin sister naturally accompanied him to the ground floor, before bidding farewell to him in a respectful manner. After returning to the shop, Chin Mayer asked in a puzzled manner, "Sister Sar, why didn't you bring out that thing? We expended so much effort to get it. Wasn't your objective from the very beginning to exchange it for more myriad-year spirit medicines?" A few days ago, I would have naturally done that, but I received an invitation slip for the Black Realm Exchange Conference from a demonic senior yesterday. I want to see if I can exchange that thing for something better during that convention. If not, I can exchange it for myriad-year spirit medicines with that man as a backup plan. In any case, he's expressed the urge to continue our exchange, so I'm not in any hurry, Chin Sar explained in a confident manner. All right, seeing as you've made up your mind, I have nothing to say. However, that item isn't very useful for us demonic cultivators, but it's like a ticking time bomb in our hands. If word were to spread that we're in possession of such a thing, we'll most likely be hunted down and killed, so it's best to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Chin Mayer nodded in response, but her concerns clearly still hadn't been completely erased. Rest assured, I know what I'm doing. This is why I didn't dare to reveal it on all those normal markets and decided to save it for this Black Realm convention, Chin Sar said in a serious manner. At this point, Han Li was already on the way back to the Immortal Welcome Palace, and he was naturally unaware that by expressing the urge to continue working with the two demonic women, he had unwittingly missed out on a treasure. At the moment, he was merely very pleased by all of the demon beast materials he had secured. Now, he was only missing a few types of materials before he could begin refining his second extreme mountain. The Myriad Treasure Convention had only just begun, so even though the remaining materials were quite precious, it definitely wouldn't be an issue for him to gather them. However, much to Han Li's surprise, right as he returned in high spirits to the Immortal Welcome Palace, he discovered that he had a guest. "It's you." Han Li appraised the purple-robed young woman before him with a surprised look on his face. This was none other than Daer, the demonic woman who had accompanied the Black Phoenix monarch. She was only at the early deity transformation stage, but it was said that she was extremely beautiful and was very renowned among the younger generation of the demon race. She was also clearly very much adored by the Black Phoenix monarch as well. However, she had been quite cold toward Han Li when they had first met on the flying immortal peak, leading Han Li to wonder whether she really was the same Daer as the one that he knew. As such, it naturally came as quite a surprise that she was suddenly paying him a visit. "Greetings, fellow Taoist. Could it be that you were sent here by fellow Taoist Zio?" Han Li asked in a calm manner. "No, I wanted to come and see you for my own reasons," the purple-robed woman replied, and her voice was very pleasing to the ears, like the crisp chirping of a lark. "You wanted to see me?" Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "That's right. I would like to speak with you in private," the purple-robed woman confirmed as she cast a quick glance toward Hai Yueshan, who was standing off to the side. "Go somewhere for now, and don't come in unless I call for you," Han Li instructed as he turned to Hai Yueshan. Hai Yueshan was very interested in what relationship this woman shared with his master, but he naturally didn't dare to go against Han Li's orders, so he could only forcibly repress his own curiosity before departing after extending a respectful bow. As for Qi Lingzi, due to the incident with the Long family, Han Li didn't even permit him to show himself in front of outsiders, so he naturally wasn't present on the scene. There were people who were aware that Qi Lingzi was an unnamed disciple of his, but Han Li wasn't concerned at all even if the Long family patriarch were to learn this information and seek him out as a result. He naturally had countless alibis prepared that could completely detach himself from that giant golden ape as two different beings. After Hai Yueshan departed, the purple-robed woman immediately flipped a hand over to produce a handkerchief that was shimmering with faint white light, then offered it to Han Li with both hands for examination. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he sighed, "So it really is you, Daer." This handkerchief was only a low-grade spirit tool that he had given Daer when she was only a little girl. It didn't have any value to speak of, and it barely served any purpose. However, Daer was very fond of it and kept it with her at all times. Now that she was bringing it out for Han Li's inspection, it was quite clear that she was the same little girl from back then. A slightly complex look appeared on her face, and after a brief silence, she suddenly raised her hand before plucking out a smooth black hairpin from out of her luscious locks. In the next instant, a ball of black light erupted from the phoenix hairpin, following which it transformed into a black feather that was around half a foot in length amid the cry of a phoenix. Almost at the exact same moment, bright white light erupted from her face, making it very difficult for one to look directly at her. Even though Han Li had cultivated a spirit eye ability, he was caught completely off guard and forced to close his eyes for a split second. Blue light then flashed through his pupils as he instantly reopened his eyes, peering through the white light, and a peculiar look appeared on her face. After the white light faded from her face, a set of exquisitely beautiful features that resemble those of a celestial maiden were revealed. Setting aside her unique disposition, her facial features alone bore a strong resemblance to those of Nangong Wan. Anyone could easily mistake the two of them as twin sisters. However, upon closer inspections, differences could be derived between the two. Nangong Wan's features were more gentle, and she appeared to be more benevolent and approachable. In contrast, Daer's facial features were just as intricate, but they were slightly colder and more aloof. Through his bright-eyed spirit eyes, Han Li was certain that this was her true appearance, and wasn't the product of any disguise or illusionary technique. Even now, he could still see a resemblance between her current appearance and that of Daer's chubby and adorable face as a little girl, but there was naturally quite a stark contrast. Han Li stared at this familiar yet alien face, and despite his calm and steadfast nature, he was rooted to the spot, at a complete loss for words. "Uncle Han, do I look similar to Aunt Nangong now?" Daer asked with a hint of a smile on her face. Han Li forcibly repressed his astonishment as he asked, "What happened? How did you take on this appearance after growing up? Have you seen Wanner somewhere before?" "I only learned Aunt Nangong's name from you, so how could I have seen her before?" Daer chuckled, and the smile on her face immediately erased her slightly cold disposition. "Now that you mention it, some of the details from back then are coming back to me. However, I still don't really understand. How did you?" Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly in a hesitant manner, seemingly having recalled something, but was also unsure of something at the same time. "Back when we were hiding under that pile of rubble, you told me many spectacular stories, all of which were about you and Aunt Nangong. On the final day, I wouldn't stop crying and kept on insisting to see my mother, so you brought out a jade slip that had Aunt Nangong's portrait inscribed on it to try and console me," Daer recounted in a soft voice. Han Li's mind also wandered back to those days upon hearing this. At the time, the city had been destroyed by a beast tide, and he had hidden with Daer under a pile of rubble. The memory brought a faint smile to his face, and he chuckled. "At the time, you had a very adorable round little face." "I recall all of that very clearly as well. I obtained my current appearance after reaching the metamorphosis stage, and my form was reconstructed through the stimulus of my Black Phoenix bloodline. As for why I took on this appearance that resembles Aunt Nangong so closely, I don't know of that myself. Perhaps it's because the portrait of Aunt Nangong on that jade slip had left with too deep an impression, so I instinctively strove toward that appearance during metamorphosis. As a body integration cultivator, I'm sure that you're aware that demonic cultivators like us have no bearing on what appearance we adopt during metamorphosis, so most of the process is outside of our control," Daer said before biting down on her lower lip in a display of embarrassment. "I see. In that case, it does seem quite plausible." Han Li nodded in an enlightened manner, but he still couldn't help but feel slightly shaken as he appraised Daer. Not long ago, he had just encountered Qin Sar and was startled by her great captivation technique, which allowed her to manifest the appearance of Nangong Wan, and now he was greeted by another person who bore such a strong resemblance to his beloved Dao companion. Could this be a sign? Could it be that something had happened to Nangong Wan? It seemed a little superstitious to be drawing such conclusions, but as a cultivator, Han Li couldn't help but be inclined to believe in such things. As such, his brows furrowed slightly in an involuntary manner, and he became slightly concerned. At this moment, Daer continued, "I've never forgotten what you did for me all those years ago, but there's a clear divide between humans and demons after all, and I didn't want to cause any trouble for you, so I intentionally gave you the cold shoulder when we first met several days ago. Back when I first arrived at the Black Phoenix Palace, I didn't meet my birth father first. Instead, Daer suddenly began to recount her experiences in the Black Phoenix race after she had parted ways with Han Li. The stories were rather mundane, but she seemed to enjoy telling them and had a smile on her face the entire time. Han Li listened patiently to her recount, and a soft and gentle look gradually crept into his eyes. They chatted for several hours, and only then did Daer suddenly recall that there was something she had to do, upon which she reluctantly bade farewell to Han Li. Han Li didn't try to keep her any longer. Instead, he imparted on her some words of wisdom as a senior before calling Hai Yueshan into the room to accompany Daer out of the hall. After she departed, The smile on Han Li's face faded, and he heaved a forlorn sigh as he sat in silence alone in the hall. Not long after that, Hai Yueshan reappeared in the hall and respectfully informed Han Li that Daer had already departed using the teleportation formation. At this point, Han Li had already reverted back to his normal calm expression, and he instructed, "Go get your junior martial brother and come see me in my room." After that, Han Li rose to his feet before making his way back to his room. Hai Yueshan's eyes lit up in response, and he hurriedly accepted this instruction before rushing off to find Qi Lingzi in high spirits. The next morning, Han Li departed from the immortal Welcome Palace and appeared on a hill that was completely devoid of human and demon presence. He sat down on a large rock before closing his eyes to rest, and he seemed to be waiting for someone. After a while, a streak of light flashed through the air, and a humanoid figure appeared on the hill. "You sure are early, fellow Taoist Han. Looks like you're very much looking forward to the Black Realm Exchange Convention," the humanoid figure chuckled as he cupped his fist in a salute toward Han Li. This man was none other than Taoist Master Myriad Bone. I am indeed looking forward to this. However, I decided to come early as a precautionary measure. This is my first time attending this convention, and I was afraid that I would miss it," Han Li replied with a calm smile. "Rest assured, the time given to us is definitely accurate. However, prior to setting off, I have to caution you on some matters so you don't incur any unnecessary trouble during the convention," Taoist Master Myriad Bone said as a serious look appeared on his face. "Go right ahead, fellow Taoist. I'll be sure to keep everything you say in mind." Han Li was slightly taken aback by the cautious demeanor that Taoist Master Myriad Bone had adopted. Taoist Master Myriad Bone was quite pleased to see that Han Li was also taking this very seriously, and he said, "I'm sure you don't actually need to be warned about most of this, but the Black Realm Exchange Convention is different from normal occasions, so I feel inclined to caution you about some things." After that, Taoist Master Myriad Bone disclosed to Han Li some of the rules and taboos of the Black Realm Exchange Convention, and Han Li listened in a careful manner. Round 10 minutes later, Taoist Master Myriad Bone looked up at the sky, which was still a little dark, and he smiled as he said, "It's about time. Let's go to the entrance together. There are always many entrances for the Black Realm every time this convention is held, so the place that we're going to will probably have only 4 or 5 people at most. However, before we go there, we have to conceal our true appearances." Having said that, there's no need to do anything drastic. There are restrictions in the Black Realm that limit spiritual sense, so just a normal disguise will suffice. It's best not to be recognized by other fellow Taoists prior to entering the Black Realm. Of course, even if you do get identified, it's still not an issue. You can just change your disguise after you enter the Black Realm, and I'm sure you'll be unrecognizable again. As expected of a veteran who had attended this convention on multiple occasions in the past, he had a lot of experience to offer. "Thank you for your guidance, fellow Taoist Myriad Bone. I know what I need to do now," Han Li replied with a smile, and at the same time a layer of gray light appeared all over his body, completely concealing him within. This was none other than his divine essence-effused light. With this light around him, it would be very difficult even for other body integration cultivators to assess his true appearance with their spiritual sense. Taoist Master Myriad Bone also followed suit, making a hand seal to summon to release a layer of black qi around himself. After that, the two of them flew away from 9 Immortal Mountain together. Meanwhile, many other body integration stage beings and some other mysterious cultivators also departed from the mountain range. However, all of them were flying in different directions. Several hours later, the sky had finally brightened into daylight, and Han Li and Taoist Master Myriad Bone descended into a bleak and barren valley outside of 9 Immortal Mountain. There were already 2 people waiting there, one of whom had golden light shimmering around their body that was so dazzling that the onlooker would struggle to look directly at them. In contrast, the other person's body was as faint and indistinct as smoke, so there was no way to identify them either. These two were standing quite far away from one another, one in the south and one in the north, and they only cast a quick glance at Han Li and Taoist Master Myriad Bone upon their arrival. It was quite clear that they were companions like Han Li's duo. Han Li merely glanced at them and didn't release his spiritual sense. This was because Taoist Master Myriad Bone had told him that it was extremely taboo for any beings to use their spiritual sense on other participants of this convention. At best, one would escape with a warning, and at worst, one would receive physical punishment for this transgression. Han Li was in support of this rule as well, so after finding himself unable to identify those two with his eyes alone, he immediately withdrew his gaze. He was confident that his bright-sight spirit eyes would be able to see through their disguises, but if they had cultivated certain special secret techniques, then they would be able to detect his scrutiny. He didn't want to draw any trouble to himself before he had even entered the Black Realm. Thus, Han Li and Taoist Master Myriad Bone found a place with a relatively high altitude and was quite far away from the other two to settle at. All four of the people present had concealed their true appearances, and no one was interested in making conversation, so the atmosphere was slightly awkward. There was no other sound to be heard aside from the faint rustling of the wind. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he calculated how much time was left, and after around an hour, a ball of green light appeared in the distant sky before hurtling toward them at a rapid speed. After just a few flashes, the green light plummeted from above like a meteorite, looking as if it were about to crash heavily down onto the ground, yet it abruptly decelerated when it was still several tens of feet above the ground, then continued to drift downward before making a completely silent landing. Han Li glanced at the humanoid figure within the green light to find that they were situated right at the center of the other four people present. After quickly looking around at everyone else, the figure within the green light seemed to put on a smile before taking a seat with their legs crossed, displaying no intention to move anywhere else. Han Li initially faltered slightly upon seeing this before a faint smile appeared on his face, as if he found this person to be rather interesting. In contrast, Taoist Master Myriad Bone appraised the humanoid figure within the green light with slightly furrowed brows, seemingly having thought of something. According to what Taoist Master Myriad Bone had said, they were the 5 people who were going to be entering the Black Realm from this particular location. Over an hour later, Han Li suddenly sensed a burst of peculiar fluctuations radiating from within his sleeve, and he immediately reached into his sleeve to pull out that triangular black badge. There was a layer of white light flashing incessantly over its surface and fluctuating in brightness, seemingly resonating with something. Han Li was elated to see this, and he raised his head to look at the other 4 people present. They had also produced the same badges, all of which were flashing with white light as well. Right at this moment, a dull rumbling sound suddenly rang out in the air above the valley, following which a burst of powerful spatial fluctuations erupted forth. All 5 of the people present were slightly startled by this, and they looked up in unison to find that a blanket of dark clouds had appeared in the bright blue sky above the valley. Within the dark clouds, arcs of silver lightning were flashing silently before instantly intertwining to form a ball. A resounding thunderclap rang out, and a massive silver gate abruptly appeared. The gate was over 100 feet tall and had profound antiquated patterns on its surface, as well as silver runes surging around it, presenting a very spectacular sight to behold. All of a sudden, a buzzing sound rang out from within the massive silver gate, and the surrounding runes tremored before faltering on the spot in unison. After that, the gate was slowly opened up ever so slightly, and a streak of black light shot out from the other side. A humanoid figure flashed, and a mysterious cultivator in a long black cloak emerged before hovering in front of the gate. This person had black chi swirling around their entire body, and they remained completely silent as they appraised everyone down below with a bone-chilling gaze. This person's aura was extremely strange, seemingly extremely powerful at times, but almost non-existent in other times. It was as if they possessed an extremely unstable cultivation base. What kind of cultivation art was this? Han Li couldn't recall any cultivation art that fit this description, and a hint of surprise flashed through his eyes. The figure enshrouded in golden light seemed to have also attended this Black Realm exchange convention in the past, and he asked in a resounding voice, "Are you the guidance envoy of the Black Realm?" The black-robed figure ignored the golden figure, and a burst of green light flashed through their eyes as they said in a menacing manner, "Did you all bring your guidance badges? If so, I'll take you into the Black Realm. Those who try to enter the Black Realm without guidance badges will be killed on the spot." The black-robed figure's voice was very sharp and piercing, and it was impossible to tell whether this was a male or female voice. The golden figure harumphed coldly, clearly displeased with the black-robed figure's display of arrogance, but he didn't say anything in the end. As for Han Li and the others, they naturally weren't going to interject either. Seeing as none of the 5 people down below had any objections, The black-robed figure immediately flipped a hand over to produce a treasure that resembled a shimmering silver drumstick. He raised the treasure and struck the giant gate with it, upon which a crisp crack rang out, and the silver gate was completely flung open amid a dull, rumbling sound. Hanli cast his gaze into the gate to find that there was nothing more than a vast expanse of inky blackness beyond the entrance. The place was completely devoid of light, as if it were a world of boundless darkness. It really did live up to its name of Black Realm. Just as these thoughts were running through Hanli's mind, the guidance badge in his hand suddenly became scorching hot, and in the next instant, it exploded into balls of black light that enshrouded his entire body. At the same time, the air tightened around him, and a burst of invisible force hoisted him upward, carrying him directly toward the giant silver gate. Hanli was slightly alarmed by this, but he looked around to find that the other 4 people had also been carried up into the air by black light as well, and his heart was put at ease. In the blink of an eye, all 5 of them had disappeared into the black world beyond the giant gate one after another, and after verifying that nothing was amiss, the black-robed figure struck the space on either side of the gate with the silver treasure before also entering the black world. The same rumbling sound rang out once again, and the giant silver gate slowly closed, then dispersed into countless arcs of lightning amid a loud thunderclap. The nearby dark clouds also instantly vanished after the arcs of lightning vanished, and the dark sky returned to its former brightness. Hanli was situated within the black light, inspecting his surroundings with a curious look on his face. Even after entering through the silver gate, the 5 of them were still enshrouded in black light and hovered in the air in a straight line. After entering this mysterious space, Hanli had completely gleaned the nature of this dark world. There was a sea of mist formed by bursts of black chi all around him, and some of the black chi appeared to be quite normal, yet others were extremely violent and tore through everything in the surrounding area in a frenzy, forming powerful black tornadoes in the process. However, what drew Hanli's attention the most were the demon beasts up ahead. There was quite a large number of these demon beasts, and their auras differed significantly from those of normal demon beasts. They were concealed within the mist in the distance, appraising Hanli and the others with menacing expressions, but didn't dare to approach them for some reason. Even from so far away, Hanli could still sense the violent auras emanating from their bodies, indicating that they were clearly nothing to be scoffed at. Black light flashed, and the black-robed figure appeared in front of the 5 of them. The figure then slowly flew ahead without saying anything, and just as Hanli was starting to feel perplexed by this, the black light around him suddenly flashed, and his body was involuntarily drawn forward by a burst of invisible power. The other 4 people with him were also experiencing the same thing, and all 5 of them were being towed along by the black-robed figure. The black light around their bodies seemed to be special, as the black chi they encountered along the way all parted to allow them passage, and they quickly flew for several kilometers. All of a sudden, blue light flashed through Hanli's eyes, and he cast his gaze toward a vast expanse of black chi up ahead. He could sense that there was an enormous being lurking within the black chi, and its aura was of the same nature as that of those unknown demon beasts from before, but it was countless times more powerful, to the extent that even he felt greatly threatened by it. However, this black chi was quite profound, and even with his spirit eye ability, he was only able to just barely make out the outlines of a mountainous beast that seemed to be a giant python. The other 4 people with Hanli had clearly also sensed that formidable beast, and they were all feeling quite wary as the beast was slowly approaching them. Right at this moment, the guidance envoy suddenly descended, taking everyone down along with them, so they diverged away from that unknown giant beast. Hanli's heart naturally eased slightly as a result, and he cast one final glance at the giant beast before paying it no further heed. However, Hanli's expression changed slightly again after just a short while. At this point, they had been led downward by the guidance envoy for tens of thousands of feet, and they still didn't appear to be anywhere near the bottom. It was as if they were descending into a bottomless black abyss. If it weren't for the fact that the other 4 people around him hadn't displayed any reactions to this, he would seriously be reconsidering whether it was a good idea to continue following this black-robed figure. Thankfully, after they had descended for over 100,000 feet, the black chi around them finally dissipated, and they emerged from the sea of black mist into a strange blue world. There was faint blue light everywhere, illuminating all of the buildings and the strange black trees that resembled massive stone pillars down below. This blue light was emanating from a dozen or so shimmering blue massive balls of light hanging in the air. Each ball had a diameter of over 1,000 feet, and they were radiating faint blue light that seemed to be able to glow for the rest of eternity. A few dull thumps rang out, and the black light around the bodies of Han Li and the others shuddered before vanishing. The connection they had with the guidance envoy was also severed as a result. I still have to go and guide others. Go to the Black Realm Hall down below, and someone will take care of you there, the black-robed figure said in a cold voice before turning away and rising up into the air again, leaving them to their own devices. Han Li was left feeling rather speechless, but Taoist Master Myriad Bone seemed to be completely unfazed. He merely chuckled before descending toward the hall, and the golden figure also followed suit as a streak of golden light. Han Li and the other two figures exchanged a quick glance before naturally following along behind them. There were many buildings down below, but all of them were very different from the ones in the outside world. All of them had been constructed from rough-looking black stones, and they were very tall and massive, reflecting an ancient primordial construction style that was more crude and rough around the edges. The Black Realm Hall that the envoy had just referred to was very easy to identify. This was a huge black hall that was over 10,000 feet tall and had an area of several square kilometers, so it was very hard to miss. When Han Li and the others landed on a plaza in front of the hall, they were greeted by 2 rows of women wearing black veils garments who were waiting for them in advance. These women's faces had all been concealed by black veils, but they all had extremely alluring figures, and their auras suggested that they were all at or above the core formation stage, so they were superb subjects for dual cultivation. As soon as Han Li and the others descended before them, the 5 women at the front of the group made their way toward them in an elegant manner. One of the tall and slender women with skin as fair as snow extended a graceful curtsy before speaking in an extremely alluring voice. "We pay our respects to our seniors. From now on, please allow us to serve you. If you have any questions or needs, we'll do our best to answer and satisfy them. There is still some time before the commencement of the convention. Would you like to go and take a rest in the designated silent cultivation chambers?" "HMPH, your Black Realm is always dabbling in these shady tricks. I don't need anyone to serve me. Just take me to the hall." The indistinct, smoky figure harumphed coldly, and her pleasant voice suggested that she was also a female cultivator. "If you don't wish to be served by us, then we naturally won't force our service upon you, senior. Number 9, take this senior to the hall," the black-veiled servant chuckled before turning to one of her 4 companions. Number 9 stepped forward upon hearing this and said, "Senior, please come with me." After that, she extended a respectful curtsy, before making her way toward the gate of the hall in an elegant manner. The smoky female cultivator cast a cold glance at number 9, before following along behind her in silence. "Hee, I don't need any rest either. Take me to the hall as well," the humanoid figure enshrouded in green light also said with a smile. Judging from his voice, this seemed to be an elderly man. The black-veiled servant agreed with a smile, and ordered another woman to take him into the hall. Thus, only 3 convention-goers were left on the plaza, one of whom was Han Li. Tusk, how could I resist a free meal like this? I'm not going to pretend like I'm some saintly gentleman. I'll be going to enjoy myself now, fellow Taoists. Taoist Master Myriad Bone guffawed in a voice that was slightly more high-pitched than his normal voice. After that, he took the initiative and stepped forward before winding his arm around the most curvaceous of the 5 black-veiled women, then departed in high spirits. The golden figure aimed a scorching gaze at the leader of the 5 women as he chuckled. "Hee, I wonder which fellow Taoist that is. I must say, I really do agree with him here. You're the leader here, so you must be the most exceptional among these 5. I'll get you to serve me." The woman didn't appear to be surprised at all by this, and she said with a smile, "I'm extremely honored to be chosen by you, senior. Number 11, make sure to take good care of this senior." She then stepped forward and sidled up voluntarily against the golden figure's body before departing with him. Han Li blinked as he looked at the 2 rows of black-veiled women standing further away, then glanced at the woman standing before him, and he made his voice more coarse and husky than normal as he asked, "You're number 11. Does that mean there were only 6 fellow Taoists to arrive here before our group?" "You're mistaken there, senior. I am indeed number 11, but we're all randomly selected to serve the other seniors that came before, rather than selected based on our number sequence." This number 11 was quite petite, and her voice was extremely mellow and delightful. She was staring up at Han Li with a pitiable expression, as if she were afraid that Han Li would dismiss her in preference for someone else. "I see. There's no need to go to the silent cultivation chamber. Accompany me to the hall. I have some things that I need to ask you," Han Li instructed. "Yes, Senior," Number 11 naturally replied in a respectful manner before voluntarily leaning her body against Han Li's. Han Li took a glance at her and wrapped an arm around her slender waist before striding toward the hall. Not long after Han Li had left the plaza, 4 more figures who were enshrouded in spiritual light of different colors descended from the sky, and they were also greeted by 4 smiling black-veiled servants. Not long after that, Han Li found himself resting on a large inclined chair with number 11 pressing her entire body against his, looking up at him with a pair of seductive eyes. At this point, Han Li had switched to a layer of azure light to conceal his own body, rather than the initial gray light. As a result, even Taoist Master Myriad Bone wouldn't be able to identify him now. They were currently situated in a black stone pavilion that was hovering in midair. Not only had a table, chairs, and spirit tea been prepared here in advance, there were even some spirit flowers and spirit's fruits that were extremely rare in the outside world placed on the stone table in front of Han Li. Han Li could see more identical structures hovering in the surrounding area, and upon closer inspection, there appeared to be around 500 to 600 of them. Most of these hovering pavilions were empty, but, like Han Li, several tens of them were occupied by someone alongside a black-veiled servant. However, Han Li paid no heed to the eyes that were being cast toward him from the other pavilions. Instead, he was appraising a massive white light barrier at the center of all of the stone pavilions. This light barrier had a diameter in excess of 1,000 feet, and within it was a tall platform that was as pristine white as jade. Not only were there a red and blue stone pillar standing on each corner of the platform, there was also a peculiar yellow formation at the center of the platform. At the very center of the formation were 2 stone tables that were completely identical, except one was black and the other was white. The platform was completely empty aside from that. All of a sudden, Han Li withdrew his gaze and asked in a calm manner, "So what you're saying is that when the exchange convention begins, your Black Realm will bring out some precious items first to exchange with us, right?" "Of course. Our Black Realm wouldn't dare to proclaim itself as the wealthiest power among the 2 races, but we're definitely comparable in that respect to the likes of the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs. There are some precious items that we purchased from other foreign races in the primordial world, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed by them, Senior," the black-veiled woman said with a smile. At this point, she had already removed the black veil over her face, revealing a set of exquisitely beautiful facial features that were extremely alluring to behold. It was quite clear that she was using some kind of special captivation cultivation art. Otherwise, there was no way that she could give off such an astonishing level of allure. However, Han Li was completely unaffected by her attempts at seduction and merely nodded in a calm manner before asking, "It's quite an investment for the Black Realm to acquire and nurture a group of women like you. I'm curious. With your looks, there's no way that you wouldn't be recognized if you were to appear in the outside world. Could it be?" "As you suspect, Senior, my sisters and I have been living in the Black Realm for as long as we can remember and have never ventured into the outside world. How about you take me as your concubine, Senior? I'll finally be able to see the light of day then." Number 11 put on a pitiable expression that would set the average cultivator's heart aflutter, and they could easily be tempted into agreeing to her request. However, Han Li possessed immense spiritual sense and willpower, and he easily brushed her off with an excuse that he preferred solitude. This number 11 clearly knew her boundaries, and seeing as Han Li had no intention of taking her, she made no further mention of this and merely sidled up against Han Li's body. Han Li reflexively tightened her arm around her waist, basking in the sensation of intimate contact with such an exquisite beauty. After that, he asked her some more questions about the Black Realm Exchange Convention, all of which were answered to a very satisfactory degree, and Han Li was quite pleased with her service. At this moment, more and more people began to appear in the surrounding hovering pavilions. All of a sudden, a resounding boom rang out from down below, causing the entire space to tremor slightly. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and blue light flashed through his eyes as his gaze instantly pierced through the dark space before him, allowing him to see the source of the commotion. At the entrance to the hall down below, there was a 100 feet tall giant that was enshrouded in a layer of scorching flames, putting on a violent and menacing display. There was a black-veiled woman beside the giant, explaining something in an urgent and panicked manner. However, the fiery giant seemed to be too angry to listen to her explanations, and it let loose a thunderous roar before a massive hand emerged from the flames, hurtling downward to crush the woman into mincemeat. Right at this moment, spatial fluctuations suddenly erupted nearby, and a streak of golden light appeared before slashing directly toward the giant without holding back in the slightest. The fiery giant let loose another infuriated roar, and was forced to turn its attention away from the black-veiled woman, reaching out toward the golden sword projection instead. A screeching metallic clang rang out as the flames and sword projection intertwined, and the giant stumbled back several steps in succession. At the same time, spatial fluctuations erupted above it, and a gray-robed humanoid figure was also forced to emerge in the air above. Hanli focused his gaze on the gray-robed figure to find that his robes were made from some kind of unknown materials that gave them an illusionary quality. On top of that, he was wearing a sinister ghostly mask and appraising the fiery giant down below with an intense gaze. "What has gotten you so worked up that you're attacking a junior, fellow Taoist? Number 37, how did you offend our esteemed guest? Hurry up and apologize." Much to everyone's surprise, even though the gray-robed figure hadn't held back at all in his attack, he was now scolding the black-veiled woman. "My sincerest apologies for my transgressions in serving you, senior. Please forgive me." Number 37's face was extremely pale, clearly still reeling from that near-death ordeal, but after hearing the order issued by the gray-robed figure, she immediately extended a respectful bow toward the fiery giant with a pitiable look on her face. The fiery giant seemed to have regained much of its composure after being struck by that sword strike, and the fury in its eyes gradually faded, but it still harumphed coldly. "I'll let you off the hook this time, but if you do something that's considered taboo in our race again, I'll swallow you alive." In the next instant, the flames around the giant's body receded, and it shrank down to become a normal human-sized red-robed figure with a pair of crimson horns. However, the red-robed figure's facial features had been completely concealed by a layer of red light. The gray-robed figure turned to number 37 before transmitting his voice toward her to ask a few questions, then nodded to end their conversation before turning to the red-robed figure in a slightly apologetic manner. "I see, so you're from that race. Number 37 did indeed cross the line here, but please forgive her. She would have had no way of knowing your origins, fellow Taoist. I'll immediately order for another better replacement to serve you." "HMPH, you can do whatever you want. I just want this convention to get started as quickly as possible. I don't have a lot of time to waste in this black realm." The red-robed demonic cultivator harumphed coldly before flying toward a certain empty stone pavilion on his own as a massive fireball. The gray-robed figure down below shook his head in a resigned manner upon seeing this, then waved a hand toward number 37. Immediately thereafter, his body swayed, and he vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Only then did number 37 rise to her feet and take her leave. Hanli was quite intrigued by the reason behind the red-robed demonic cultivator's furious outburst, but seeing as the matter had been addressed in a relatively peaceful fashion, he withdrew his gaze and closed his eyes again to continue to rest. Meanwhile, number 11 stood up before quietly making her way behind him, before using her fair, delicate hands to gently massage his shoulders, serving her much like a mortal servant would. With Han Li's immensely powerful body, he naturally didn't require any such services to relieve fatigue, but it was still quite an enjoyable experience to receive this gentle massage while breathing in the fragrant scent wafting from her body. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D658, letter 1D498, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4FF, letter 1D658, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D662. He lay still on his chair, and it seemed that he had truly fallen half asleep. Thus, time slowly passed, and more of the stone pavilions were filled. After about 6 to 8 hours had passed, almost all of the stone pavilions had been taken. Even so, there were only a total of around 400 to 500 people present, but considering the fact that there were several tens of body integration cultivators among them, while most of the rest were spatial tempering cultivators carrying extremely valuable treasures, this was indeed an extremely formidable gathering. Despite the growing number of convention-goers, all of the human and demonic cultivators in the stone pavilions kept to themselves, either sitting in silence or sipping on spirit wine or spirit tea on their own, without displaying any intention to communicate with others. Thus, an extremely silent atmosphere had settled over the entire hall. After around another hour had passed, a ball of piercing golden light suddenly erupted in the air above the pristine white platform, following which a giant black bell and a green humanoid figure emerged at one corner of the golden formation. The huge bell was about as tall as a person and was completely black in color, with a few traces of rust visible along its edges. At the center of the bell was a diagram depicting a black worm with a single eye that was giving off an unsettling red light. The green figure that had emerged alongside the black bell had a small purple club in his hand, and his upper body was completely bare, revealing a burly and strong physique. His skin was of a light green color, indicating that he wasn't a human, but there was no demonic chi emanating from his body either, thereby making it quite difficult to determine just what kind of being he was. However, there was a faint golden metallic luster intermingled with the green of his skin, so it was quite clear that he had cultivated some kind of special body refinement art and definitely possessed an immensely powerful body. All of the cultivators in the stone pavilions naturally cast their eyes toward the black bell in unison, waiting for what was going to happen next. The burly green-skinned figure was completely unfazed by the scrutiny from so many powerful beings. He merely took a deep breath, and green light swirled around him, upon which his body expanded to over twice its original size, taking him to around 30 feet tall. His arms also expanded significantly, as bulging veins began to squirm like worms beneath his skin, and he tightened both of his hands around the purple copper club before swinging it toward the giant black in a slow and extremely careful manner. The bell chimed, and a purple halo of light proliferated forth from the center of the giant bell, rippling through the air before vanishing in a flash. Hanley faltered slightly upon seeing this, and before he could react, the burly green-skinned man's body suddenly deflated like a punctured balloon. In the blink of an eye, he had been reduced to a frail and emaciated elderly man with white hair and a white beard, looking as if he were close to his deathbed. That strike of the bell seemed to have exhausted all of his energy and a vast amount of his lifespan, an occurrence that came as quite a shock to all of the observers present. Hanley's pupils also contracted upon seeing this, but the bell chime just now was quite ordinary and didn't seem to be special in any way. However, in the next instant, the spiritual power within his body suddenly began to churn, and his blood essence also began to flow at several times its normal speed before becoming extremely hot within his body. Hanley was quite alarmed by this, and he immediately rose to his feet. He circulated his own powerful true essence to forcibly quell these physical reactions, and almost at the same time, he discovered that his magic power seemed to have increased slightly after hearing that bell chime. Hanley wasn't the only one to experience this. After their initial alarm, all of the other cultivators present also discovered the changes in their magic power. For body integration cultivators, this improvement was very minor and only equated to around several months of arduous cultivation at most. In contrast, spatial tempering cultivators received a much more significant boost in magic power that was the equivalent of over 10 years of arduous cultivation, which was naturally fantastic news for them. All of the body integration cultivators were quite bewildered by this occurrence, and they immediately turned to appraise the giant black bell with intense, unblinking eyes. Expressions like greed and ecstasy flashed over their faces, and it was as if they would like nothing better than to rush onto the platform and grab the treasure for themselves. Just the chime of this bell alone could enhance one's cultivation base. How astonishing was that! Using the treasure seemed to have caused significant backlash that left the green-skinned man a shell of his former self. But even so, this was definitely a supreme treasure that defied the natural order. Could this be a legendary, profound heavenly treasure? And Lee also had the same suspicion as he appraised the black bell in an astonished manner. Unfortunately, spiritual sense was greatly restricted here in the black realm, thereby preventing him from assessing the black bell in the distance with his spiritual sense. Otherwise, the fact that he owned the profound heavenly fruit would make him more able than others to determine whether this was indeed a profound heavenly treasure. At this moment, the frail old man on the platform suddenly placed the purple club in his hands down onto the black stone table before him in a respectful manner. Spiritual light then flashed from beneath his feet, and he instantly vanished on the spot. In the next instant, he was replaced by another humanoid figure, who appeared on the other side of the bell. This humanoid figure wore a set of silver brocade robes and a golden wormhead mask. His eyes were of a bright green color, and he didn't seem to be a human either. His emergence on the platform naturally instantly drew everyone's attention, and he looked around briefly at all of the surrounding hovering pavilions before speaking. Hee. I'm sure all of you have just experienced the miraculous power of this heaven match bell. That bell chime was a small gift from our black realm to all of you. This heaven match bell is one of the most precious treasures we have to offer during this convention, and we're bringing it out as the first item for exchange to liven up the atmosphere. I'm sure this treasure won't disappoint the lucky fellow Taoist who manages to secure it. What? This treasure really is being offered for exchange. Even though most people had already guessed this to be the case, it still came as a shock to some after receiving verbal confirmation from the golden masked figure. As long as you can offer treasure that I'm satisfied with, why wouldn't I exchange this heaven match bell? The golden masked figure chuckled. That's rather strange. I've attended this Black Realm exchange convention on many past occasions, and the treasures that have been offered for exchange are certainly nowhere near mundane, but very few treasures of this caliber have appeared, and never has one been brought out as the first exchange item. Could it be that your Black Realm is also preparing for the upcoming tribulation? An elderly voice rang out, reverberating throughout the entire hall, thereby making it impossible to deduce exactly which stone pavilion it had originated from. Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. The tribulation that was being referred to here had to be the upcoming devilish tribulation. It was quite clear that all of the convention-goers present were aware of the devilish tribulation. Thus, no one was surprised by the question that was being asked, and everyone turned to appraise the golden-masked figure, awaiting his answer. Indeed, fellow Taoist, the devilish tribulation will befall both the human and demon races, and as a part of the two races, our Black Realm certainly isn't exempt from this, so it would only be normal for us to make some preparations in advance. However, I have to correct you on one thing. This heaven match bell is indeed quite an extraordinary treasure, but not as extraordinary as you think, and it possesses some flaws. Compared to the treasures brought out in the past Black Realm exchange conventions, it actually is inferior to a few of them, the golden masked figure said with a smile. Flaws? Can you elaborate on that, fellow Taoist? Is this not a profound heavenly treasure? A cold voice rang out from another stone pavilion, and it was clearly tinged with a hint of disappointment. Profound heavenly treasure. Hee. You think far too highly of our Black Realm, fellow Taoist. We may be quite powerful, but there's no way we could get our hands on such a treasure. There's no way that even the 3 sovereigns and 7 monarchs, or even the 2 grand ascension cultivators in our 2 races would possess profound heavenly treasures. Even if such a treasure were to fall into the hands of our 2 races, it would bring genocidal disaster upon us. Otherwise, why would that united foreign race army have attacked Deep Heaven City several centuries ago? The golden-masked figure said in a meaningful voice. He was intentionally being slightly ambiguous with his words, but many of the body integration cultivators present were clearly aware of what he was referring to. The golden-masked figure paused momentarily before continuing. However, seeing as our Black Realm is willing to offer this heaven match bell for exchange, we naturally have an obligation to disclose this treasure's origins to everyone. In a sense, this treasure has also been imbued with a hint of the laws of heaven and earth, so it does indeed possess some incredible abilities akin to those of profound heavenly treasures. The treasure was discovered within a secret region on the territory of an extinct foreign race, and it was quite damaged when we found it, so it's nowhere near as powerful as it otherwise could be. According to the textual annotations found in that secret region, this treasure should be part of a pair of treasures, which comprised of the most powerful treasures of that extinct race. Aside from this heaven match bell, there's also a heavenquake mallet, and the 2 of them should be used together. Unfortunately, we searched through that entire secret region, but were unable to find that heavenquake mallet. As such, we could only commission a tool refinement master to refine a replica heavenquake mallet using precious materials such as deep-sea purple copper, and the process took a vast amount of time and resources. This replica wasn't exactly a resounding success, and it can only achieve 10% of the effect that the original treasure would be capable of at most. As for repairing the heaven match bell, that would require extremely special materials that can't be found in this realm, so we could only leave it in its current form. Otherwise, if we could have the complete heaven match bell and the original heavenquake mallet to accompany it, the powers of the 2 treasures wouldn't be inferior by much, even compared to a profound heavenly treasure. Of course, if we had been able to accomplish this, then there's no way that we would be bringing out this treasure as the first item for exchange during this convention. Right at this moment, an indifferent female voice suddenly rang out. I don't really care if this is a profound heavenly treasure or not, I just want to know its exact abilities and flaws. Of course, I was just getting to that. I'm sure all of you have already experienced this bell's ability to enhance one's magic power. However, this ability is only effective for cultivators at or above the deity transformation stage. A chime of this bell can enhance a deity transformation cultivator's magic power by a degree equivalent to 30 years of arduous cultivation, which is reduced to around 10 years for spatial tempering cultivators, and for body integration stage fellow Taoists, the effect is quite minimal. However, the bell only works 3 times for each person. After that, no matter how many chimes of this bell one listens to, it won't do anything for them. On top of that, if the number of people listening to the chime of the bell on a single occasion exceeds a certain threshold, the magic power enhancement effect would be significantly hampered. As the golden-masked figure continued in his introduction, the scorching looks in everyone's eyes faded significantly. Most people were shaking their heads and giving up what they perceived as a lost cause. Not only that, but not just any cultivator can make this bell chime. A body refinement warrior must be selected, and they must reach a certain level of mastery in a foreign cultivation art that we secured from the same secret region. Due to the fact that this heaven match bell is damaged, the one who strikes the bell will suffer backlash from the power of laws within this treasure, depleting them of their true essence and leading to their death not long after the event. Hence, if you want to use this bell, then you have to nurture a group of specialized body refinement warriors who are willing to die for this cause, which may be quite troublesome. However, if it were to be used appropriately, this heaven match bell can still be quite useful, especially to those who are part of large families or sects. The golden-masked figure finally completed his introduction. After hearing all of this, Han Li's brows furrowed slightly, and he returned to his seat. It was quite clear that this heaven match bell wasn't going to be of much use to him. In contrast, he was rather interested in that foreign body refinement art that the golden-masked man had mentioned. Like Han Li, many of the other people present had also lost interest in this treasure after hearing this lengthy introduction. The entire hall was silent for a while before someone finally asked, "What would you like for this treasure? I'm sure normal items wouldn't be able to catch the attention of your black realm." Not necessarily. I'll state a few items that I'm willing to exchange this treasure for, and if any of you possess one of those items and are willing to offer it for exchange, this treasure is yours. If none of you possess any of those items, then we're willing to exchange this treasure for top-grade spirit stones or spirit medicines over 1,000 years old as well, but that will naturally require an unimaginable sum, the golden-masked figure said, and everyone was quite surprised to hear this. Are you serious? The same unknown female cultivator seemed to be very interested in this heaven match bell, and she was very excited to hear this. Of course, I wouldn't make jokes on such an occasion. On top of that, our Black Realm naturally has more items we'd like to offer for exchange than just this heaven match bell. Here is a list of items that we're searching for in exchange for our treasures. The golden-masked man flipped a hand over as he spoke to reveal a white jade slip. Immediately thereafter, spiritual light flashed, and a pillar of white light erupted from the jade slip before dispersing into a series of ancient silver characters in midair. These characters depicted the names of over 100 types of items. Over 3 kilograms of earthian crystals, a 30-feet-long section of snow spirit wood, green blood fruits that are over 100,000 years old. Han Li looked at the list of items and was quite stunned by what he saw. Not only was Han Li stunned by the items on the list, many of the other people present were also quite astonished by what was being shown. All of these items were extremely difficult to find in the spirit realm, and even those of the black realm couldn't be sure that the convention goers would have these items, so they had listed alternative options, such as using large amounts of spirit stones and spirit medicines to substitute for those items. Of course, it was quite possible that there were people who possessed items on this list, but simply wouldn't want to exchange them for such a circumstantial treasure. After all, this heaven match bell would only be useful for those who were part of large powers. Han Li sat in his chair and appraised the list of items with a contemplative look in his eyes. I don't have a 30-feet-long section of snow spirit wood, but I do have a section that's 10 feet in length. Would I be able to make up the rest with spirit stones? The same woman from before asked. It was quite clear that she really did want this treasure. I'm afraid not. The size of the snow spirit wood is very important to us, and we won't be able to use it even if it's just a single inch too short, the golden-masked man replied without any hesitation. That's rather disappointing. I really want this heaven match bell, but I'll have to give up on it, the woman sighed before falling silent. If I don't have any of the things on this list, can I offer other items for exchange? A completely emotionless voice rang out from a stone pavilion in a secluded corner of the hall. Theoretically, yes, but we will only take materials that we require, and they have to be of the same caliber as the ones we've listed, the golden-masked man replied with a smile. The man who had spoken seemingly hesitated momentarily before speaking again. In that case, take a look at this and tell me what you think. As soon as his voice trailed off, the pleasant cry of a crane rang out from that stone pavilion, and a snowy white crane with a black wooden box held between its beak flew out of the pavilion. With a single flap of its wings, it reached the white light barrier in a graceful manner, then passed through it without any impediment, presumably as the golden-masked figure had done something to grant it passage. The golden-masked figure raised his hand, and the crane immediately opened its mouth, releasing the wooden box and allowing it to fly into the man's grasp. After that, the crane continued to circle around in the air above the stone platform, refraining from landing, but also displaying no intention to return right away. Meanwhile, the golden-masked man had already opened the black wooden box, and a burst of green light flashed from within it. His pupils contracted slightly at the sight of the item in the box, and a serious look appeared on his face. He didn't reach into the box to touch the item, but light flashed through his eyes as he examined the item intently for a long while. The owner of the white crane knew that the item was being carefully appraised, and he waited patiently for the verdict. All of the other people present were naturally curious about what was inside the wooden box, and they were also waiting for the response. If that item failed to satisfy the golden-masked man, then they would still have chances to secure this heaven match bell. After a while, the light in the golden-masked man's eyes finally faded, and he heaved a long, wistful sigh. "Are you not satisfied with this item, fellow Taoist?" The owner of the crane seemed to be quite taken aback. Normally, the value of this item would indeed match that of many of the materials on my list, but if I want to truly make use of it, I'll have to nurture it for at least 10,000 years. The tribulation is about to befall us within 1,000 years, so I would rather take more pragmatic things such as spirit stones and materials that can be used right away. The golden-masked man replied in a euphemistic manner. He then placed the lid over the wooden box again before tossing it into the air. The white crane let loose a sharp cry before swooping down to catch the box between its beak again, and it then flew out of the light barrier and headed back to its master. After a brief silence, the owner of the white crane heaved a slightly forlorn sigh. "That's quite a pity." The golden-masked man's brows furrowed slightly in response to the lukewarm reception that the heaven match bell was receiving, and after a while, he heaved a resigned sigh. "Are there other fellow Taoists wishing to offer items for exchange? If not, then I'll have to auction off the item for top-grade spirit stones or spirit medicines." Everyone remained silent, and no further offers were made. "In that case, let's commence the auction." A wry smile appeared on the golden-masked man's face, yet just as he was about to commence the auction, a coarse male voice suddenly rang out. "Please wait, I have something that your black realm wants. No, to put it more accurately, it's something even more precious. Would you like to see it, fellow Taoist?" A hint of surprise flashed through number 11's eyes, and her massaging hands faltered slightly. The man who had just spoken was naturally none other than Han Li. At this point, he had already flipped a hand over to produce a yellow jade box. "Of course, I would be more than happy to see it. If you really do have something of exceptional value, then I'll definitely offer an exchange that's worth your while." The golden-masked man was elated to hear this. Han Li merely remained silent as he swept a sleeve through the air, and a white snake flew forth before swallowing the jade box, then shot forth as a streak of white light. "Hem." The golden-masked figure glanced at the snake right as it flew into the white light barrier and slowly descended beside him, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face. He had clearly identified that this was no ordinary puppet. After landing beside the golden-masked man, the white snake opened its mouth to expel that yellow jade box. Compared to the special properties of this puppet, the golden-masked man was naturally more interested in what lay in this jade box, and he carefully caught the box before removing the lid. A ball of black light was hovering within it, and within that ball of light was a shimmering silver spirit herb that was several inches tall. "This is a yin phoenix herb," the golden-masked man exclaimed in an ecstatic manner. Right at this moment, Han Li's voice transmission sounded beside his ears. "That is indeed a yin phoenix herb, and it's been growing for hundreds of thousands of years, so it's far more precious than the 70,000-year-old yin phoenix herb that your black realm is searching for." It's been growing for hundreds of thousands of years. The golden-masked figure drew a sharp breath upon hearing this before hurriedly releasing his spiritual sense to encompass the entire herb and commencing a thorough appraisal. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. He had obtained this spirit herb from that medicine garden in the vast glacial realm, and he had given most of them to the body integration cultivators of the heavenly cloud races, leaving only one for himself so he could secure the spirit herb seeds. After returning to Deep Heaven City, he had already used a special secret technique to secure those seeds, so he had a superfluous yin phoenix herb that wasn't really useful to him. Of course, he also had a few other spirit herbs that were no less rare and precious than this yin phoenix herb, and he had secured seeds from all of them as well. Han Li hadn't originally intended to exchange for that heaven match bell, so if yin phoenix herb hadn't been on the list that the golden masked figure had presented, then he would have merely passed up this treasure. However, seeing as they were actively searching for the spirit herb and he didn't have much use for it, he was naturally going to maximize its value by exchanging it here. On top of that, he really was quite interested in the foreign body refinement art enclosed with this heaven match bell, so he finally decided to speak up after some careful contemplation. This appraisal was clearly more thorough than the last one, and it also took a lot longer. Finally, the golden-masked figure exhaled as he concluded his appraisal, and his lips tremored as he transmitted his voice to Han Li. "Where did you obtain this yin phoenix herb from, fellow Taoist? I was unable to determine its exact age, but it's at least been growing for 200,000 years. Can you verify its exact age?" The golden-masked man's voice was filled with unbridled excitement. "I'm afraid I'm unable to verify its age either. The only way to ascertain its age would be to refine it into pills, then examine the effects of those pills. However, I can indeed confirm that this spirit herb has been growing for far longer than 200,000 years. Are you interested?" Han Li replied with a voice transmission of his own. "We are most definitely interested, but a small portion of this spirit herb seems to be missing. As such, its value will be discounted," the golden-masked figure said in a slow voice. "I've taken the seeds for this spirit medicine for myself. As I'm sure you're aware, the seeds of this yin phoenix herb aren't worth much at all, so even if the value is to be discounted, it shouldn't be by much. As such, I definitely won't be willing to exchange it just for this heaven match bell alone. If you want this spirit herb, then show me some sincerity. Didn't you say that the Black Realm has some other precious treasures to put up for exchange? If you're unwilling to negotiate, then I would rather keep this yin phoenix herb to exchange with the other fellow Taoists present." Han Li's eyes narrowed as he transmitted his voice in a cold manner. "This is quite an important matter, so I'll have to discuss it with some other people before I give you a response," the golden-masked figure replied in a solemn manner after a brief hesitation. "Of course, go ahead," Han Li replied. After that, the golden-masked man raised his head to look up into the sky, and his lips tremored incessantly as he held a discussion with his hidden colleagues. Everyone could only wait while the discussion took place. Thankfully, the discussion ended quite quickly, and not long after that, the golden-masked man transmitted his voice to Han Li again. "Aside from this heaven match bell, we're willing to offer you another one of the most precious treasures that we have for exchange. However, you don't get to choose what that second treasure is. Of course, if you're not happy with the second treasure and decide to pass up on it, we'll compensate you with a huge sum of spirit stones. If I don't get to choose, then I'd rather keep this spirit herb for the next round of exchanges," Han Li replied with furrowed brows. "You're naturally well within your right to do that, but I must caution you that different materials will be required to exchange for the next few treasures we'll be offering. These treasures have all been contributed by different elders of our Black Realm, and all of them have different needs. Hence, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to exchange for two treasures even with this spirit herb of yours if you pass up this heaven match bell," the golden-masked figure said. "Are you saying the next few treasures will be even more precious than this heaven match bell?" Han Li's heart stirred upon hearing this. That'll depend on what you perceive to be of value," the golden-masked man replied in an ambiguous manner, not disclosing any further information to Han Li. Han Li's lips twitched slightly upon hearing this. The golden-masked man thought that he was interested in the heaven match bell, when in reality, he only wanted the accompanying foreign body refinement art. As for whether he could secure the bell or not, that was completely inconsequential to him. With that in mind, Han Li asked, "How will I know that this second treasure is one of the most precious treasures on offer for exchange as you proclaim? What if you find a random treasure to swindle me with?" The golden masked man was clearly very confident in this second treasure, and he replied in a proud manner, "He, you don't have to worry about that, fellow Taoist. I'm sure that a cultivator of your caliber will be able to identify a precious treasure from a dud. If you're not satisfied with the second treasure, you can always refuse to make the exchange." After a brief pause for contemplation, Han Li agreed to this arrangement. "In that case, you have to let me see the second treasure first, right? If it's indeed useful to me, then I'll accept the exchange." The golden masked man's confident display made him quite curious about just what this second treasure was. "Sure, please wait a moment, fellow Taoist." The golden masked figure smiled as spiritual light flashed from his hand, and a golden cloth pouch appeared before being tossed into the air. White light flashed, and the white snake sprang forth like lightning, swallowing the pouch before flying out of the light barrier and heading back to Han Li. Han Li extended a hand, and the golden pouch fell into his grasp. He raised an eyebrow as he immediately loosened the opening of the pouch, then swept his spiritual sense into it, following which a stunned look abruptly appeared on his face. As soon as he opened the pouch, bright azure light erupted forth, accompanied by a burst of buzzing. Immediately thereafter, something attempted to fly out of the pouch, and Han Li immediately placed a hand over the pouch's opening, sealing it amid a flash of golden spiritual light. The azure light and the strange buzzing sound both vanished after that flash of golden light. What is the meaning of this? Han Li stared blankly at the pouch for a long while before abruptly turning to the golden masked man and transmitting his voice toward him again. "I'm offering that item and the heaven match bell for your yin phoenix herb," the golden masked figure replied with a confident smile. "HMPH, if this item were completely refined, then it would naturally be an extraordinary treasure, but you're trying to exchange for my yin phoenix herb with just an embryo. You sure are a shrewd businessman," Han Li harumphed coldly. "Do you think we'd be offering this item if it were completely refined? In that case, even without the heaven match bell, just this item alone would be worth 7 or 8 yin phoenix herbs of the same age," the golden masked figure replied in an unyielding manner. "That's true. This item would indeed be indispensable to any cultivator after being fully refined. However, an embryo is still an embryo. It's still far from being completely refined. Who knows if it'll be worth exchanging such a precious spirit herb for something that'll be completely useless during the upcoming devilish tribulation." Han Li sighed after a brief pause. That'll be up to your luck, fellow Taoist. If you can survive the devilish tribulation, then find a way to refine this item, then you'll have earned yourself an extraordinary asset. Truth be told, this is something that one of our Black Realm elders was refining, and he only decided to offer it for exchange as he knew that he wouldn't be able to completely refine it," the golden masked man revealed in a truthful manner. Han Li stroked his chin and fell into silent contemplation. The item in the pouch was a legendary treasure among the human and demon races, and once successfully refined, it could assist a cultivator significantly in their cultivation. It was said that only a tiny handful of people possessed this type of treasure in the entirety of the two races. At present, it was only a semi-finished product, but if it weren't for the imminent devilish tribulation, Han Li would exchange it for his yin phoenix herb almost without any hesitation, let alone the fact that the heaven match bell was also being thrown into the deal. However, this treasure was a spirit item that was born from heaven and earth. Not only was it extremely difficult to form its embryo, completing its refinement was virtually an impossible task. Otherwise, such a valuable treasure wouldn't be so exceedingly rare among the two races. Even so, the miraculous effects of this treasure in its fully refined form still posed quite a tempting prospect to Han Li, and it was no wonder that the golden masked man was so confident that he would agree to this exchange. At the same time, it also showed just how determined he was to secure this yin phoenix herb. Through the interaction between Han Li and the golden masked man, the other people in the nearby stone pavilions had also deduced that there was a good chance that this exchange would be a successful one. As such, many people were naturally curious about just what was in the jade box that Han Li had offered, and what was in the cloth pouch that the golden masked man had offered in exchange. However, with the powerful spiritual sense restrictions in this place, they were naturally unable to ascertain any of those details. "All right, I agree to this exchange," Han Li officially agreed after just a brief moment of contemplation. "You've definitely made the right decision, fellow Taoist," the golden masked man said with an elated look in his eyes. He then swept his sleeve toward the heaven match bell to send a burst of golden light surging toward it, and the giant bell rapidly shrank down to around the size of a human palm in the blink of an eye, then hovered in midair within the golden light. The purple club had also shrunk down to around the thickness of a finger, and was drawn into his hand as a streak of purple light. Letter 1D557, letter 1D563, letter 1D41E, letter 1D41E, letter 1D604, letter 1D41E, letter 1D68C, letter 1D560, letter 1D696. The rest of the process was very simple. The golden masked man placed these two items into a wooden box before making a hand seal, and a giant black crow abruptly appeared in the air above the platform. The crow caught the black box between its beak before delivering it to Han Li, while the golden masked figure carefully stowed away the jade box containing the yin phoenix herb. Han Li also stowed away the heaven match bell and golden pouch before laying back in his seat and closing his eyes again. Thus, the exchange had been completed. Number 11 immediately resumed her gentle massage. All right, the first treasure has been successfully exchanged. I'll now be bringing out some tool and pill refinement materials that are extremely rare in the outside world. I'm sure they'll pique the interest of many of the fellow Taoists present. These materials aren't extremely precious, but they're all very pragmatic items that are in severe shortage. Due to the vast amount of these materials, we'll be exchanging them in 3 separate batches. Please pay attention. I'll now be displaying a new list of items that we're looking for in exchange for these materials. If more than one person sets their eyes on a single batch of materials, then I'll be the one to decide which exchange is more favorable for our Black Realm, the Golden Masked Man announced. At the same time, 2 jade slips appeared in his hands, and he waved them through the air in unison. The ancient characters hovering in the air began to change, with some of the original items vanishing, while many new items were added to the list as well. At the same time, another light screen appeared beside the existing one, and that screen displayed the 3 batches of materials that the Black Realm was offering for exchange, of which there was an absolutely staggering amount. It was quite clear that these materials were extremely popular, and as soon as they were displayed, many people immediately began to offer exchanges, and the silent atmosphere in the hall was immediately set alight. As for Han Li, he merely looked on and displayed no intention of making any offers. The 3 batches of materials were quickly exchanged, and the next item that the Golden Masked Man presented came as quite a surprise to Han Li. This was a group of 7 exquisitely beautiful human women, each of which were at the foundation establishment stage or above, and they all had special constitutions that made them extremely viable dual cultivation partners. They were all quite young, and only minimal nurturing would be required to develop them into exceptional concubines or dual cultivation partners, so there was naturally a lot of interest displayed toward them as well. After much competition, a mysterious purple-robed man secured this item with a piece of profound light iron in exchange. After that, the Black Realm brought out their second major treasure for exchange, which was a peculiar antiquated yellow flag. It was an extremely powerful treasure left behind by a mighty figure back when the human race first established itself in the spirit realm. Even to this day, that mighty figure was still vastly renowned, and it was said that this treasure possessed extraordinary powers. On top of that, it was very versatile and could be used as the core of a super formation, or simply used as a weapon against enemies in battle. Even Han Li was tempted by these treasures, but unfortunately, the Golden Masked Man presented a list of only 3 other treasures in exchange for this item, each of which was no less precious than this flag, and that naturally proved to be a significant hurdle for those who were interested in the treasure. Coincidentally, one of the people present really did have one of the 3 stipulated treasures, and not only did he secure the yellow flag, after some bartering, they also secured an additional large sum of spirit stones in exchange as well. This was a mysterious individual enshrouded under a cloud of blood mist, and Han Li couldn't help but turn toward them with an intrigued expression. After that, the Golden Masked Man brought out some items that were produced in the Wood Tribe and Spirit Race, and all of these items had special uses. As such, they were very attractive to the convention-goers present, and they clamored to offer the items required by the Black Realm for exchange. A few more major treasures were brought out by the Golden Masked Man thereafter, all of which were vastly renowned and possessed abilities that weren't inferior to the Heaven Match Bell and the antiquated yellow flag. Furthermore, these treasures either had astonishing defensive abilities or extraordinary offensive capabilities, so they were a lot more pragmatic than the 2 aforementioned treasures, and they definitely provided a fantastic shortcut to enhance one's powers. As such, the entire hall was stirred up into a near frenzy as everyone competed for these treasures. The final treasure was a sea-parting fan, which was ranked slightly above the middle of the pack on the chaotic myriad spirit roll. It was said to be able to move mountains and part oceans, possessing unimaginably enormous power. Over 20 cultivators pulled out all types of materials in heaps and piles in a bid to secure this treasure, and in the end, the golden masked man chose the one who had offered the most materials, and exchanged the sea-parting fan in exchange for those materials, as well as a few more powerful treasures. Han Li was also interested, but unfortunately, the treasure was being exchanged for some precious legendary crystals rather than spirit medicines, and Han Li didn't possess any of those crystals. Following that transaction, all of the items that the Black Realm had prepared had been exchanged, and none of them had to be auctioned off for spirit stones. This was a clear indication that the Black Realm had done their homework beforehand and were well aware of what everyone wanted. The golden masked figure was clearly very pleased with the proceedings thus far, and he announced, "Everything our Black Realm had to offer has been exchanged. It's now time for the free exchange segment of the convention. If you have any items that would be of interest to our Black Realm, I'd like to ask you to consider offering them to us for exchange." As for the rules, they're the same as always. Only a maximum of 3 people at a time will be allowed onto the stage to display the items they'd like to offer for exchange, and it'll be up to you to negotiate all of the terms. Our Black Realm won't intervene at all during this segment. All right, I hereby announce the commencement of the free exchange segment. In that case, allow me to go first. As soon as the golden masked figure's voice trailed off, a sinister voice abruptly sounded. Immediately thereafter, a streak of black light shot forth from one of the stone pavilions, and after just a few flashes, it appeared in the air above the white light barrier. This was a gray-robed man, with his entire body enshrouded within peculiar wisps of black light. HMPH, you sure seem like you're in a hurry, fellow Taoist. I'll also be taking the stage with you. Several more streaks of light shot forth from other hovering pavilions almost in complete unison, but seeing as someone had arrived on the platform first, one of the streaks of light immediately brightened significantly before vanishing on the spot, then reappearing within the light barrier in the next instant as if via instant teleportation. This was an elegant figure enshrouded within a layer of 5-colored light. It was a female cultivator. A sharp cry rang out from another streak of light, and it blurred slightly before doubling in speed, arriving on the stone platform ahead of its competition. A hint of surprise appeared on Han Li's face upon catching sight of this third person, who had an extremely peculiar figure. He was around 10 feet tall and about just as many feet wide, resembling a massive meatball as he stood on the platform. However, on this meatball was the head of a normal man, which was currently etched with a concerned expression and completely unconcealed. Everyone else was too slow, and they were rebounded by the white light barrier, preventing them from descending onto the platform. "Please go back for now, fellow Taoists. You can come back in the next round," the golden masked man said as he cupped his fist in a polite salute. The people outside the light barrier were naturally quite reluctant to leave, but they could only depart in a disgruntled manner. The gray-robed man who had descended onto the platform first let loose a burst of delighted laughter. It was naturally quite a privilege to be able to present their items in the first round. Otherwise, if something they needed were taken by someone else before they could take the stage, that would naturally be quite infuriating. The golden masked man glanced at the human meatball before chuckling. "I'm glad you came to participate in our exchange conference again, Brother Zhu. On top of that, you seem to be very eager. I'm sure the memory of missing out on that treasure during the last convention still haunts you to this day. We both had 100 segment beads, but mine was clearly of a higher caliber. If he hadn't taken the stage before me, how would the treasure have ended up in his hands? I really hate participating in this exchange convention as my figure makes me stick out like a sore thumb no matter how I try to disguise myself, but I hardly have any choice." The meatball sighed as the concern in his eyes was exacerbated even further. The cultivation art you're using has been vastly renowned since ancient times. You may not be able to manipulate your own body as you please, but countless people would gladly accept this disadvantage for your immense powers." This meatball seemed to be quite an important and powerful figure, as evidenced by the fact that the golden masked man was speaking to him in an extremely polite manner. I know you're only saying that to make me feel better, but my mood has been buoyed nonetheless. I hope I can reap some worthwhile rewards during this exchange convention." Despite what he was saying, the meatball was still looking quite unenthusiastic and forlorn. The golden-masked man smiled before taking over 10 steps backward, standing in silence on one corner of the golden formation. The gray-robed man was clearly also quite wary toward this meatball, and after a brief pause, he cupped his fist in a salute and said, "Seeing as Brother Zhu is so eager to present his treasure, I would be happy to let you go first." The female cultivator enshrouded under 5-colored light didn't say anything, but she also nodded to accept this arrangement. "In that case, you have my thanks, fellow Taoists." The meatball returned the gray-robed man's salute before abruptly patting his own bulging belly, then opened his mouth to expel a shimmering white small vial that landed in his hand. "There are 3 balls of golden crow true flames in here, and I'll only exchange them for a myriad-year golden bone zoysia or false meridian herb, with 1 fireball exchanged for each spirit plant," the meatball announced. "Golden crow true flames. Is that true? How did you manage to get your hands on such true spirit flames?" "If he's the one offering them, then the flames are most likely real. Having said that, I'm quite surprised that he's willing to part with such flames." The announcement immediately created a stir throughout the entire hall, and after a brief moment of surprise, Han Li stroked his chin as a contemplative look appeared on his face. His spirit-engulfing heavenly flames had absorbed a wisp of this true spirit flame from the demonic birds in the Golden Demon Mountain ranges, and that had significantly enhanced their power. If this demonic cultivator really did possess this type of true spirit flame, and he had as many as 3 balls of such flames, then that would allow the spirit-engulfing heavenly flames to become significantly more powerful. Unfortunately, he sounded extremely determined to accept only the 2 types of spirit medicines that he had stated, and Han Li had neither of them, so he was feeling slightly frustrated. At this moment, the meatball carefully removed the lid of the small vial, then patted the bottom of the vial with his hand, and 3 scorching white fireballs flew out from within. The 3 fireballs then transformed into a trio of white fire ravens that flew around him. The 3 fire ravens were completely pristine white in color, and there were faint silver runes swirling around their bodies. Scorching heat immediately filled the entire light barrier, causing it to tremor slightly in an unsteady manner. Those really are golden crow true flames. If someone using a fire attribute cultivation art were to refine these flames, they would benefit immensely. More chatter rang out from all directions, and a series of envious and greedy eyes fell upon the 3 white fire ravens. Everyone's spiritual sense had been severely restricted, but all of the convention-goers present naturally had extremely sharp discerning eyes, and even from this far away, they could determine with relative certainty that these were indeed golden crow true flames. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, allowing him to glean the true appearance of the golden crow true flames within those 3 white fire ravens, and a peculiar look appeared on his face as he murmured to himself, "These are diluted golden crow true flames." His voice was so faint that even number 11 failed to hear what he had just said. After making this observation, the frustration in Han Li's eyes faded, and he looked on with a cold expression. Meanwhile, the gray-robed man had also brought out a 3-colored lotus-shaped treasure that was of the ice attribute. He declared that it could release 3 types of glacial flames, and would be extremely powerful when wielded by someone using an ice attribute cultivation art. In exchange for this treasure, he would only accept a fire attribute treasure of the same caliber. Letter 1D6 letter 1D5 letter 1D5 letter 1D4 1E, letter 1D4 letter 1D6 letter 1D4 1C, letter 1D6 letter 1D5 As for the female cultivator enshrouded within the 5-colored light, she had brought out a head-sized crimson ball, which was the egg of a bloodflame falcon. This was a type of primordial beast that was renowned for its ferocity, and after reaching full maturity, bloodflame falcons had an average wingspan of over 100 feet. On top of that, they were adept in abilities that were of the extremely rare blood attribute, and depending on what innate ability they developed, they could potentially ultimately attain spatial tempering stage or even early body integration stage power. The woman proclaimed that she had secured this egg from a nest owned by a pair of body integration stage bloodflame falcons, and she was only willing to accept a spirit treasure for it. These 2 items naturally garnered much interest from those using ice attribute cultivation arts and those who were adept in taming spirit beasts. Moments later, someone began to offer treasures in exchange for those 2 items. As for the 2 items requested by the meatball, they were clearly extremely precious, and even though there were many people interested in his golden crow true flames, no one offered the spirit medicines he had requested. The gray-robed man and the female cultivator's items were both exchanged for satisfactory items, and the meatball's concerned look only deepened upon seeing this. After a short while, there was still no one making offers for his flames, and he heaved a forlorn sigh before stowing the 3 fire ravens away, then flew back to his own stone pavilion, choosing to abandon this exchange. His decision naturally drew a lot of intrigue from the onlooking convention-goers. However, everyone's attention was soon redirected toward the next 3 cultivators who had flown onto the platform. Han Li looked on through narrowed eyes as one precious item was presented after another. Those who completed successful exchanges were elated, and those who failed were naturally very disappointed as they returned to their stone pavilions empty-handed. The majority of items presented were successfully exchanged, but it was quite clear that compared to the previous editions of the convention, there were far more complete treasures being exchanged compared to materials. This was a clear sign that everyone was preparing for the upcoming devilish tribulation, getting rid of what they didn't need in exchange for complete treasures that would enhance their powers. After all, no matter how precious certain materials were, they were useless if they couldn't be refined into treasures prior to the devilish tribulation. For those who were able to participate in this convention, normal treasures naturally were of no interest to them, yet the powerful treasures that could catch their eye generally could only be refined using several tens or even over 100 types of precious materials. Setting aside the fact that there was a chance of failure during the refinement process, it would take hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years just to gather so many materials. Otherwise, precious materials would have been far more prevalent during this convention than completed treasures. After over half a day had passed, most of the people offering items for exchanges had taken the stage. Han Li had been very tempted by many of the powerful treasures being presented, but all of these people demanded other treasures of the same caliber in exchange, so he could only pass up on those opportunities. However, that didn't mean that this entire process had been a completely fruitless one for him. Not only did he use one of the spirit medicines he had secured from the vast glacial realm to exchange for several sets of extremely powerful formation flags, he had also exchanged a flagon of red silk immortal wine for a dozen or so spirit medicine seeds that he didn't yet have from an avid wine enthusiast. He had also taken the stage himself not long ago and offered some myriad-year spirit medicines for the demon beast materials that he was still yet to collect. As a result, he was able to easily secure those materials from a few demonic cultivators, and that came as quite a relief to him. After securing those materials, he would be able to begin refining his second extreme mountain following the conclusion of the Myriad Treasure Convention, and should he be successful, his powers would be significantly enhanced again. Just as Han Li laid back in his chair, thinking that the rest of the convention wouldn't have much to do with him, a person enshrouded under a layer of dense black chi flew onto the stage, then slowly pulled a black round bowl out of his sleeve. This is a sinful cloud manifested from 10 million beast souls. I can guarantee that all of the souls used belong to ferocious beasts, and 100,000 of them belong to low-grade demon beasts. I want to exchange this sinful cloud for an offensive divine spirit treasure on the chaotic myriad spirit roll. As soon as this announcement was made, everyone's expressions, including Han Li's, changed drastically, and they all turned to stare at him in an astonished manner. The golden-masked man who was standing at the corner of the golden formation was also stunned to hear this, and his smile immediately faded as he stared intently at the man who had just spoken with a bewildered look in his eyes. In spite of the intense scrutiny he was receiving, the mysterious figure within the black chi remained completely unfazed and raised the round bowl with one hand, then removed the lid of the bowl with his other hand. A burst of ghastly howling immediately rang out, and inky black dark clouds swept forth alongside strong winds from within the round bowl in a frenzy. The dark clouds dispersed and spread to cover an area of several acres. Blue light flashed within Han Li's eyes, and he was able to instantly discern these dark clouds as countless black projections. Among them were familiar beastly figures like wolves, tigers, and lions, but also some strange types of beasts that he had never seen before. All of these beastly projections were constantly transforming and tearing at one another. At times, their bodies would crumble away into nothingness, and other times, they would reappear in their original forms. These beastly projections were none other than the aforementioned beastly souls. A sinful cloud that was manifested by tens or even hundreds of these beastly souls weren't particularly valuable, but their value spiked dramatically once that number increased to the tens of thousands. This was because a sinful cloud's power directly correlated with the number of souls it had been manifested from. The more souls that were used, the more difficult it would be to successfully manifest a sinful cloud. A sinful cloud manifested from over 100,000 souls would be extremely alluring to those using Devil Dao cultivation arts, and one that was manifested from over 1 million souls would be enough to drive even body integration stage Devil Dao cultivators into a frenzy. As for sinful clouds manifested from over 10 million souls, there didn't seem to be that many even in the entire history of the two races. Needless to say, the enhancements it would bring to those using the relevant cultivation arts would be almost unimaginable, regardless of whether this sinful cloud was used in cultivation, or as a material to refine a ghostly treasure. However, setting aside the fact that very few people knew of the method to manifest a sinful cloud of this caliber, just the task of collecting 10 million souls was virtually an impossible one. After all, slaughtering 10 million living beings would result in such severe, baleful chi backlash that even a body integration cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand it on their own. Due to the heinous nature of the process required to manifest sinful clouds, refinement of such treasures had been strictly prohibited in the two races since ancient times, and it was said that heavenly phenomena would take place whenever a sinful cloud consisting of more than 10,000 souls was refined. The phenomena triggered by sinful clouds manifested from over 1 million souls would be even more difficult to keep out of the public eye, and such items existed almost only in myths and legends. As such, this sinful cloud, which the man claimed to have been manifested from 10 million beastly souls, was naturally quite an astonishing notion. If this item had been revealed in the outside world, everyone would most likely be fighting over it already. 10 million beastly souls. Is that true, fellow Taoist? It doesn't really look like it. A dry voice rang out, and it was tinged with a hint of astonishment and skepticism. That's because I only released 1% of all of the beastly souls within this sinful cloud. If I were to release them all at once, this tiny hall wouldn't have anywhere near enough capacity for them. However, anyone who's interested can come and see for themselves just how many beastly souls there are in here, the man on the platform said in an unhurried manner. You want an offensive divine spirit treasure on the chaotic myriad spirit roll for this. Aren't you asking for a bit too much? How about this? I'll give you 3 top-grade spirit treasures for that sinful cloud, someone offered in a slightly urgent manner. I won't accept anything other than an offensive divine spirit treasure. The man within the black chi refused without any hesitation. Don't be so quick to jump to decisions, fellow Taoist. How about you take a look at what I'm offering first? Another elderly voice suddenly sounded at this moment, following which a streak of crimson light shot forth toward the platform. A tall and thin humanoid figure that was enshrouded within a layer of crimson light, then appeared above the white light barrier before tossing forward a jade vial. The jade vial passed through the light barrier without any impediment, and the figure within the black chi caught it in a slightly reluctant manner. He removed the lid of the vial and took a look inside, upon which he immediately shuddered as if he had been struck by lightning. How about it? I'm sure you know what that pill entails, right? If it wasn't for the fact that this sinful cloud will be quite useful to me, I definitely wouldn't be offering this pill for exchange, the figure within the crimson said as he looked at the vial in a wistful manner. After a long hesitation, the man within the black chi shook his head before tossing the vial back to its owner. No, I still won't accept this over a divine spirit treasure. The figure within the crimson light faltered momentarily in disbelief before exclaiming, Do you not recognize what this is, fellow Taoist? This is a clear cleansing pill that can increase a body integration cultivator's chances of breaking through bottlenecks. Clear cleansing pill. Fellow Taoist, would you be willing to exchange that clear cleansing pill for any other treasure? All of the body integration stage beings present immediately erupted into a frenzy upon hearing the name of this pill, and several of them began to yell offers directly at the man within the crimson light. This pill was clearly more popular than the sinful cloud, and that made sense. A sinful cloud manifested from 10 million souls was most definitely a legendary item, but it was only useful to devilish and ghostly cultivators. In contrast, clear cleansing pills were extraordinary pills that were universally useful for all body integration cultivators, and it was especially alluring to those whose cultivation bases had stagnated for many years. The sinful cloud seemed to be extremely important to the figure in the crimson light, and after taking a resentful glance at the man within the black chi, he said, "HMPH, if you want my clear cleansing pill, then help me exchange for this sinful cloud, and I'll gladly hand over this pill." The entire hall fell silent upon hearing this. Generally speaking, all of the body integration cultivators present should have a few spirit treasures up their sleeves, but even in the entirety of the human and demon races, there were definitely no more than 10 divine spirit treasure that were on the chaotic myriad spirit roll. As for offensive treasures for this caliber, there were perhaps only 2 or 3. Even if such a treasure did exist in the human or demon race, its owner might not be present at this Black Realm Exchange convention. On top of that, divine spirit treasures on the chaotic myriad spirit roll were no less valuable than clear cleansing pills, so whether someone would be willing to accept this exchange was another matter altogether. Han Li stared at the medicine vial containing the clear cleansing pill, and a contemplative look appeared on his face. Seeing as no one had accepted this exchange offer after such a long time, the figure in the black chi knew that there was no chance of such a trade taking place. Thus, he shook his head in a slightly disappointed manner, then made a hand seal to withdraw the black cloud before turning to leave the platform. "Please wait, fellow Taoist." The figure within the crimson light immediately rushed toward the figure in the black chi before blocking his way. "What is the meaning of this? Are you trying to force me into a trade?" The man within the black chi immediately flared up with rage, and a frosty aura erupted from his body. The golden-masked figure also immediately rose to his feet, upon witnessing the actions of the man in the crimson light. As one of the organizers of this convention, he naturally couldn't just stand by idly if someone were to start trouble in the Black Realm. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist. I bear no ill will. It's just that this sinful cloud is indeed extremely important to me, so I implore you to wait for a while longer. Give me some time to try and secure a treasure that fits your requirements, and if that doesn't work, then I definitely won't press the issue any further," the figure in the crimson light explained in an urgent manner as he held up his hands as a display of his pure intentions. The figure within the black chi hesitated momentarily before nodding in response. "You want me to wait some more? All right, I can tell that you really do want this sinful cloud, so I'll give you 10 more minutes. If you still can't get what I want by then, I won't waste any more time here." It was quite clear that the man in the crimson light was desperate to secure this sinful cloud, and the man in the black chi was also very eager to get his hands on a divine spirit treasure. Neither of them wanted to give up, even if there were only the slightest sliver of an opportunity for them. The man in the crimson light heaved a faint sigh of relief upon securing agreement from the owner of the sinful cloud, and after a brief pause for contemplation, he waved a hand over his storage bracelet in an extremely reluctant manner to produce a shimmering golden scroll. "I once ventured into a set of ancient ruins, within which I almost met my demise on several occasions, and I found this scroll in there. This scroll is extremely mysterious, and I have no way of opening it without damaging it, so I've kept it in its original condition for all this time. However, I'm sure that this scroll contains astonishing secrets, as the seal of this scroll is inscribed in golden seal text. I'm willing to exchange my clear cleansing pill and this scroll for an offensive divine spirit treasure on the chaotic myriad spirit roll," the man in the crimson light announced in a loud voice. "Golden seal text. Could it be that this is something from the true immortal realm?" This announcement naturally created another stir and attracted a lot of interest. They weren't concerned that the man in the crimson light could be deceiving them, as it was a simple matter to see if a seal had been undone before. Unfortunately, even though many people were tempted by these conditions, they simply didn't have the required treasure and could only look on in a resigned manner. Han Li focused his gaze on the golden scroll, and he seemed to be quite tempted, but he remained seated firmly in his chair. As time passed and no one stepped forward to accept this offer, the man in the black chi grew more and more disappointed, and the agitation of the man in the crimson light was growing by the second. If he were to miss out on this extraordinary sinful cloud during this Black Realm Exchange convention, there would be no way that such an item would appear in another auction. The owner of the sinful cloud would definitely hide it in an extremely secretive manner after leaving this place, so if this exchange couldn't take place, then there would be no way for him to track down the item again. This sinful cloud was extremely important to him, as it was a vital decisive factor on whether he would be able to transcend his next major heavenly tribulation. Without this sinful cloud, there was a very slim chance that he would be able to transcend that tribulation, so it could be said that this sinful cloud was virtually as important as his life. Could it be that there really was no one present who possessed an offensive divine spirit treasure? As the time afforded to him by the man in the black chi dwindled, the man in the crimson light became more and more desperate, and he gritted his teeth before abruptly patting a blue cloth pouch that was hanging from his waist. A burst of blue light immediately surged forth, following which a translucent blue ice cage appeared in his hand. The cage was only around a foot tall, and there were several golden and silver talismans plastered to the surface. Within the cage was a snowy white spirit bird that was standing proudly atop a horizontal artificial branch crafted from some kind of shimmering silver wood, and it was appraising everything in the surrounding area in a completely expressionless manner. This is an ice phoenix that has inherited some of the heavenly phoenix's bloodline. It may only be at the core formation stage right now, but that's only due to a debilitating injury. With some care and nurturing, it could easily return to the former height of its powers in just a few centuries, and I can assure you that after reaching the metamorphosis stage, this ice phoenix has an extremely beautiful human form. On top of that, it possesses the origin yin physique, and both those factors make it an exceptional dual cultivation partner. I'm sure you all know the benefits of integrating yin and yang by absorbing her heavenly phoenix origin yin qi, so I won't elaborate on that. Even if that doesn't have as potent an effect as a clear cleansing pill when assisting one in breaking through a bottleneck, it definitely won't be far off. Even if you don't take her origin yin qi and can somehow tame her, she would still be a spirit beast with limitless potential. I'm sure she won't disappoint you. I came into possession of this ice phoenix by chance, and I'm willing to offer her along with the other two items for an offensive divine spirit treasure. This is already everything that I have. If you miss out on this opportunity, something like this won't ever come around again. The desperation was really beginning to show in the man's voice now, and he resembled a beast that had been driven into a corner. This wasn't an overreaction at all. The thing that could save his life was right before his eyes, yet he couldn't obtain it. Anyone would be just as desperate if they were in his shoes. However, there was still no reaction from anyone in the hall. In his desperation, the man in the crimson light turned toward the man in the black chi again. "Fellow Taoist, if I were to offer these 3 items to you." The man in the black chi cut him off without any hesitation. "I've already made myself very clear. I won't accept anything aside from an offensive divine spirit treasure on the chaotic myriad spirit roll." The man in the crimson light was plunged into complete despair upon hearing this. However, right at this moment, a male voice suddenly rang out, and it was like heavenly music to his ears. "All right, I'll take you up on that trade." The man in the crimson light was initially in complete disbelief, but after a brief stunned stupor, an ecstatic look appeared on his face. "Are you serious? Please join me on the platform." At the same time, he immediately focused his gaze on the pavilion where the voice had come from. The man in the black chi was clearly also very excited to hear this. The one who had spoken was naturally none other than Han Li. Ever since the man in crimson light had brought out that ice phoenix, he had been appraising it with a peculiar expression, and after a brief moment of contemplation, he made his decision. Many other people also cast astonished glances toward Han Li upon hearing this. However, he paid no heed to them and shot forth as a streak of azure light, appearing on the platform after just a single flash. Even now, the man in the crimson light was still in disbelief, and he asked in a slightly trembling voice, "Do you really possess a divine spirit treasure?" Han Li smiled and took a glance at the snowy white ice phoenix in the cage first, then replied in a calm manner, "I do indeed possess quite a powerful offensive divine spirit treasure, but I'm not completely sure whether it's on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, so I'll need you two to confirm it for me." The elation in the heart of the man in the crimson light immediately dimmed significantly upon hearing this, but he still prompted in a hopeful manner, "Oh, I see. Please bring it out then, fellow Taoist." As for the man in the black chi, he remained completely silent and merely looked on as the interaction took place. Han Li naturally had no intention of delaying any further, and he immediately summoned a giant black blade that was taller than an adult human. The blade was extremely antiquated in design and gave off a primordial aura. This was none other than the giant blade that Han Li had obtained after slaying that powerful wrong being in the vast glacial realm. It was no less powerful than his chaotic origin ruler, and both of those items should be on the chaotic myriad spirit roll. Before the man in the crimson light even had a chance to react, the man in the black chi exclaimed in an elated manner, That's the profound light blade. The hope in the heart of the man in the crimson light was immediately reignited upon hearing this, and he hurriedly asked, "Do you recognize this blade, fellow Taoist?" The man in the black chi forcibly repressed the excitement in his heart and said in a serious manner, "Of course I do. This is one of the last few divine spirit treasures on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, but it fits my criteria nonetheless. I've been searching for such a treasure for a long time, so how could I not have done my research beforehand? Having said that, I must examine this item first to verify its authenticity." "Of course, fellow Taoist, would you be able to?" The man in the crimson light immediately became extremely polite toward Han Li. "I naturally have no objections, but shouldn't you let me examine the items you're offering as well?" Han Li asked with a smile as he flicked his wrist and tossed the giant blade toward the man in the black chi. "Of course, please go right ahead, fellow Taoist." The man in the crimson light was ecstatic to see things progressing so smoothly, and he immediately tossed the medicine vial, scroll, and ice cage toward Han Li. Blue light immediately flashed through Han Li's eyes, and he also released his spiritual sense to conduct a thorough examination. At this moment, the man in the crimson light had naturally also taken the sinful cloud for examination to verify whether there really were 10 million beastly souls contained within it. The three of them all completed their examinations quite quickly. The man in the black chi merely injected his spiritual power into the giant blade, then performed a practice swing with it before nodding in a pleased manner and stowing it away into his storage bracelet. "Haha, this sinful cloud is indeed everything you proclaim it to be, fellow Taoist." The man in the crimson light chortled after completing his examination of the sinful cloud, and he flew through the white light barrier as a streak of black light, returning to his stone pavilion without saying anything further to Han Li and the man in the black chi. Han Li merely smiled upon seeing this, and he stowed away the golden scroll and medicine vial before taking a glance at the ice phoenix. "Y'all know who it is, LOL." A hint of humanized sorrow flashed through the ice phoenix's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by its normal cold expression. Han Li released a spirit beast bracelet before drawing the ice phoenix and the cage into the bracelet together. After that, he cupped his fist in a salute toward the man in the black chi before flying back to his stone pavilion as well. The man in the black chi chuckled before following suit, departing from the stone platform as a gust of black wind. Thus, the next group of people immediately rushed onto the stone platform, and the exchanges continued. Han Li leaned back against his chair and closed his eyes, looking quite calm and collected, but his tumultuous emotions belied his calm exterior. Close to half a day later, the golden-masked man finally announced the conclusion of the exchange convention. Han Li and the other body integration cultivators all euphemistically refused the golden-masked man's offer to stay behind for a feast, and they departed from the Black Realm, led by a guidance envoy. They then emerged at another completely alien exit before flying back toward 9 Immortal Mountain. The entire exchange convention had taken almost a day and a night, and when Han Li returned to the Immortal Welcome Palace, it was noon the next day. He summoned Hai Yueshan and Qi Lingzi to his room, and he was relieved upon hearing confirmation that nothing out of the ordinary had taken place during his absence. After sending his 2 unnamed disciples away, he entered the secret chamber before taking a seat on a futon. He then flipped a hand over to produce a blue spirit beast bracelet, which he tossed up into the air. A burst of blue light swept forth from the bracelet, and a translucent ice cage appeared before him. Within the ice cage was the snowy white ice phoenix, and it clearly didn't expect to be released so soon. It hurriedly flapped its wings to release a silver halo of light that instantly concealed its body, then turned to Han Li with a cautious expression. After catching sight of Han Li, a hint of disbelief immediately appeared in the ice phoenix's eyes, and it exclaimed, "It's you. How could this be?" It had the pleasant voice of a young woman, but it was slightly cold and forbidding. "Long time no see, Fairy Phoenix. I didn't think that we would be reunited here," Han Li sighed as he appraised the ice phoenix. This ice phoenix was naturally none other than the very same ice phoenix that had ventured with him into that spatial node back in the human world. In the end, they had been forcibly separated by spatial storms, only to be reunited now. This ice phoenix had once stood at the very pinnacle of the human world, yet after just a few centuries, she had been reduced to a state where she was unable to even take on a human form, and had been sealed into a cage as a spirit beast. Han Li couldn't help but think to himself about how fate and fortune worked in such remarkable ways at times. At the same time, He was filled with indescribable emotion at the sight of the ice phoenix that he had worked with to travel to the spirit realm. She was the reason behind his decision to accept the exchange proposed at the convention. So it really is you, Brother Han. That must mean you were the one who exchanged for me during the convention. Have you already reached the spatial tempering stage? The ice phoenix's voice was still as cold as ever, but it was trembling slightly. That's right, it is indeed me. As for my cultivation base, that's something that you'll find out soon enough. Never did I think that I would meet you during the Black Realm Exchange Conference, and under such remarkable circumstances at that. It appears that fate has decided that it's not yet time for us to completely sever our ties. Let me get you out of this cage first. Azure light flashed from one of Han Li's fingers as he spoke, and he tapped his fingertip onto the golden and silver talismans on the cage. The talismans immediately drifted off the cage amid a bright flash of light, and the cage was also opened at the same time. Thank you, fellow Taoist Han. The Ice Phoenix was still slightly bewildered, but she was naturally elated to see this, and she flapped her wings before flying out of the cage as a ball of white light. Immediately thereafter, the Ice Phoenix's body swelled drastically to over 5 feet in length amid a flash of silver light. The feathers on her body were glittering and transparent, and it looked as if she had been carved out of profound ice. The Ice Phoenix stretched her elegant body before shaking her head in a forlorn manner. Unfortunately, I'm unable to metamorphosize, so I'll only be able to converse with you in this form. Please forgive me, fellow Taoist. That's all right. With the foundation that you've built up in the past, it would be a simple task for you to return to the metamorphosis stage after the seal within your body is lifted, Han Li said with a smile. I see you've identified the seal within my body, Brother Han. This restriction was planted by that body integration cultivator, and it's quite troublesome. According to him, it seems that only other body integration cultivators will be able to undo the restriction. The Ice Phoenix had clearly assumed that Han Li was only at the spatial tempering stage, so she didn't think that he would be able to do anything. Is that so? Let me give this a try, Han Li chuckled before suddenly reaching out with a pristine white hand and laying it onto one of the Ice Phoenix's pristine white wings. A burst of 5 colored flames immediately surged forth, flooding into the Ice Phoenix's body in a frenzy. The Ice Phoenix felt a burst of glacial power instantly flow through her meridians before crashing violently against the layers of restrictions within her body. The restrictions were quickly destroyed, and she was naturally ecstatic to see this, but also very astonished. To think that he could undo these seals so easily. Could it be that he was already at the body integration stage? That was downright incredible. It was somewhat plausible that Han Li had been able to progress to the spatial tempering stage within a few centuries if he had encountered some miraculous opportunities during this time. But the body integration stage was surely beyond his reach. These thoughts flashed rapidly through the Ice Phoenix's mind, and after the restrictions within her body were undone, she opened her beak to say something. But in the next instant, her heart stirred slightly, and she reflexively swallowed her words. After breaking the restrictions, the burst of glacial power within her meridians didn't leave her body right away. Instead, it converged toward her dantian and surged into her demon core. The Ice Phoenix was slightly bewildered by this, but Han Li's enormous true essence was far too powerful for her to resist, so she could only passively accept this injection of glacial power. Moments later, her aura spiked drastically, and she reached a certain bottleneck in the blink of an eye. A dull thump rang out, and a ball of piercing white light erupted forth, inundating her entire body. Only then did Han Li withdraw his hand, with a faint smile on his face. The scintillating white light swirled before fading away, and a silver-robed woman appeared before his eyes. The Ice Phoenix had managed to adopt her human form. The silver-robed woman's eyes were filled with excitement, and she examined her own body in an elated manner before extending a grateful curtsy toward Han Li. I must thank you once again, fellow Taoist Han. There's no need to be so polite and formal. If we hadn't worked together several centuries ago, I definitely wouldn't have been able to come to the spirit realm on my own. Besides, the burst of true essence that I injected into your body is only enough to temporarily boost you to the metamorphosis stage. If you want to be able to permanently maintain this form, then you have to go into seclusion right away. Otherwise, once this burst of true essence fades away, you'll be forced to revert back to your original form, Han Li reminded. Of course, with the assistance of this burst of true essence, I'm sure I'll be able to return to the deity transformation stage far faster than I would otherwise be able to. It seems that you really have progressed to the body integration stage, fellow Taoist Han. It looks like I'll have to refer to you as Senior Han from now on. The silver-robed woman sighed with a peculiar look on her face. I was only able to reach this cultivation base through enormous turns of fortune. With your aptitude as an ice phoenix, it'll only be a matter of time before you reach the body integration stage as well. You are my only acquaintance from the human world here in the spirit realm, so please refer to me as an equal. Otherwise, I would feel rather uncomfortable, Hanley said in a nonchalant manner. The silver-robed woman could tell that Han Li was being genuine and said, "In that case, then please pardon me, Brother Han. How were you captured and reduced to such a pitiful state, fellow Taoist Phoenix?" Han Li couldn't help but ask. "Now that you mention it, you are partially to blame for my misfortune," the silver-robed woman replied with a wry smile. Han Li faltered momentarily before an enlightened look appeared on his face. "Oh, could it be that the restrictions I planted in your body back then activated after we were separated?" "Indeed, you sure planted some extremely profound restrictions within my body, Brother Han. It took me close to 100 years to just barely refine them, but I was severely debilitated as a result and was targeted by a bunch of cowards. I managed to escape through the use of a secret technique, but my cultivation base plummeted thereafter, and I ended up in this current state. Come to think of it, if that body integration cultivator hadn't stepped in to save me, I would most likely be dead by now. However, after he discovered that I was unable to metamorphosize, he merely treated me like a spirit beast and was preparing to make me his bonded spirit beast. I naturally refused to accept such an arrangement, so I was locked up in this cage," the silver-robed woman explained. Han Li nodded in response before asking, "Oh, do you know who this body integration cultivator is?" The silver-robed woman considered this question momentarily before replying, "I'm afraid not. That man is very proficient in illusionary techniques and would often change his appearance and location, making it impossible for me to glean his true appearance. The only thing that I'm sure of is that he's a devil Dao cultivator of your human race and not part of the demon race." "A devilish cultivator. There are only a few renowned devil Dao body integration cultivators in our human race. He should be one of them," Han Li said with a contemplative nod. "Regardless of who he is, he did save my life. Then again, he did try to force me to become his spirit beast thereafter, so I guess we're even now." The silver-robed woman didn't seem to harbor any resentment toward her body integration stage captor, and it was impossible to tell whether she actually thought this or whether she had no choice, but to say this as she couldn't exact vengeance on a body integration cultivator anyway. Han Li smiled in response before changing the subject. "Now that you're free, what are your future plans? Are you planning to return to the demon race? The Black Phoenix race has also inherited the bloodline of the Heavenly Phoenix, so I'm sure you'll be treated quite well there." The silver-robed woman's composure immediately cracked upon hearing mention of the Black Phoenix race, and she gritted her teeth in a resentful manner as she said, "The Black Phoenix race. HMPH, the cowards who targeted me and dealt those debilitating injuries upon me were none other than members of the Black Phoenix race. If I go to them in my current state, I may as well serve my own head up on a silver platter." Han Li was quite surprised to hear this, and after a brief pause he continued, "The ones who injured you were members of the Black Phoenix race. That makes things quite troublesome. What are your plans then, Fairy Phoenix?" The silver-robed woman contemplated this question for a long while before finally replying in a hesitant manner, "I want to stay with you before I recover my magic power. Is that all right? As a body integration cultivator, I'm sure you'll be more than capable of protecting me. I'm simply far too weak in my current state, and the fact that I'm an ice phoenix is bound to attract endless problems for me. No matter where I hide, someone will track me down, and I could end up in an even worse situation than before." "You want to stay with me?" Han Li seemed to be rather taken aback to hear this. "I'm aware that I'll only weigh you down in my current state, but I possess some aptitude in formations and spatial abilities, so perhaps I can lend you some assistance. On top of that, I have a burst of heavenly phoenix origin yin qi within my body that should be extremely effective in improving your chances of breaking through future bottlenecks. As long as I can return to my former cultivation base, I'm willing to transfer this origin yin qi to you," the silver-robed woman said with a faint blush on her face. "What are you saying? Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist Han. Our Ice Phoenix race had an inherited secret technique that can allow us to expel our heavenly phoenix origin yin qi out of our bodies without having to engage in dual cultivation. Of course, The effect will be slightly less potent, but it should still provide some assistance to you," the silver-robed woman explained as her expression reverted back to normal. A hint of surprise flashed through Han Li's eyes upon hearing this, and after some contemplation he said in a serious manner, "I see. In that case, I would indeed like your assistance when the time comes. In the meantime, you can stay with me, but there are some things that I have to make clear to you first so you don't regret your decision later on." The silver-robed woman was elated to hear that Han Li was willing to consider her proposal, and she immediately prompted, "Please go ahead, Brother Han." "Firstly, I can't guarantee that you'll be absolutely safe by staying with me. Setting aside everything else, just the imminent devilish tribulation will be an extremely difficult hurdle for body integration cultivators like me to overcome. Even I'm not fully confident in my ability to survive that ordeal. Secondly, I have some secrets that I don't want other people to know. If you want to stay with me, then you have to follow my instructions in your cultivation, as well as everything else. If you can't accept such limitations, then feel free to leave. Lastly, due to the fact that you're a demon in the presence of others, you'll most likely have to appear beside me as a concubine or servant, which may tarnish your reputation," Han Li said in a slow voice. "Devilish tribulation. I don't know much about that, but seeing as it's something that'll impact both the human and demon races, I'm sure I wouldn't be any safer anywhere else. If I were to seek refuge with a major power in my current state, I wouldn't most likely just be used as cannon fodder, so it's much safer for me to stay with you. As for everything else, I'll naturally follow your lead. With your current status, countless core formation and nascent soul stage female cultivators would flock to your side if you were to announce that you were searching for a servant or concubine, so such an arrangement doesn't bother me in the slightest," the silver-robed woman replied with a nonchalant smile. "In that case, I'll agree to let you stay with me. Here are some pills for you. Prior to the conclusion of the Myriad Treasure Convention, stay in this secret chamber for now and cultivate. Once we return to my cave abode, I'll set up a separate place for you to cultivate," Han Li said as he swept a hand over his storage bracelet, producing several jade vials of different colors before tossing them toward the silver-robed woman. The woman caught the vials one after another, before removing their lids and inspecting their contents with her spiritual sense, upon which an elated look appeared on her face. "I didn't think you would have so many pills that can enhance one's magic power. In that case, I'll definitely be able to return to my former cultivation base very soon." Rest assured, Fairy Phoenix. I have more than enough core formation and nascent soul stage pills to satisfy your needs. If you require anything else, feel free to tell me. I presume that the higher your cultivation base is, the more efficacious your heavenly phoenix origin yin qi will be for me. In order to transcend this devilish tribulation, I'll most likely have to borrow your heavenly phoenix origin yin qi at some point during the next few centuries," Han Li said with a smile. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Han, I'm not one to repay kindness with ingratitude. When the time comes, I'll be sure to do everything in my power to help you," the silver-robed woman said with a gorgeous smile that lit up her cold features, evoking imagery akin to that of countless flowers blooming through the winter snow, and even Han Li couldn't help but stare for a moment in a transfixed manner. She seemed to have detected the entrancement in Han Li's eyes, and a faint blush appeared on her face as she extended another curtsy. "Seeing as you've agreed to allow me to stay with you, I'll begin cultivating right away. The sooner I can recover my magic power, the sooner I'll be of assistance to you. All right, I have to examine the treasures I've obtained from the convention, so you can cultivate in this secret chamber." A hint of clarity returned to Han Li's eyes, and he nodded before departing from the secret chamber. Following Han Li's departure, the silver-robed woman stood on the spot with a peculiar look in her eyes for a long while before heaving a faint sigh. She then opened one of the medicine vials and tipped out a fiery red pill before swallowing it. After that, she took a seat on the futon that Han Li had been sitting on before, and began to refine the power of the pill. Meanwhile, Han Li had made his way to another secret chamber nearby that was of an identical size, and he was also seated on the ground, examining a near-transparent golden pill through narrowed eyes. As expected of such a renowned pill, it really is different from everything I've seen before. Hopefully, it'll truly be as effective in assisting me in my breakthroughs as the legends claim, Han Li murmured to himself before carefully stowing the pill away again. After that, spiritual light flashed from his hands again, and two items appeared at once, one of which was a golden scroll, while the other was a golden cloth pouch. The scroll was one of the three treasures that Han Li had obtained from the man in the crimson light, while the golden pouch was the second treasure that he had secured from the Black Realm. Han Li tossed the golden scroll up and paid no further heed to it as it hovered in midair. He then focused his attention on the golden pouch and loosened its opening, releasing a string of azure light that shot forth from within the pouch amid a loud buzzing sound. Green light flashed, and 12 green wooden rods that were each several inches in length appeared before him. The rods flew through the air in pursuit of one another, as if they had already attained some spiritual nature. Han Li made a hand seal upon seeing this before letting loose a low cry as he abruptly reached out with one hand. 5 bursts of azure light surged forth from his fingertips, then transformed into countless azure threads that dispersed through the air. The threads then intertwined to form a massive azure net that encompassed the entire secret chamber. In the next instant, the 12 green wooden rods were caught like fish within a net. Despite the fact that they were constantly turning and twisting in an attempt to free themselves, they were completely trapped by the azure threads. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face, and he withdrew his outstretched hand. The azure net immediately tightened, and the 12 wooden rods were all dragged toward him, and he plucked one of them out of the net before inspecting it in a careful manner. The surface of the wooden rod was a vibrant green color, and it was covered in a series of extremely profound silver runes. However, what was even more astonishing was the bursts of pure and viscous spiritual chi emanating from these wooden rods. So these really are the legendary spirit gathering stakes. To think that spiritai wood was used as the main material to refine as many as 12 embryos. What an extravagant project. I wonder if I'll be able to completely refine this set of treasures someday. With the assistance of the completed version of these treasures, I'll be able to absorb spiritual power from heaven and earth at a far faster rate. Han Li murmured to himself in a contemplative manner as he stroked the wooden rod in his hand. Letter 1D627, letter 1D4C7, letter 212F, letter 212F, letter 1D464, letter 212F, letter 1D623, letter 1D450, letter 1D630, letter 1D45A. After a short while, he shook his head before tossing the wooden rod into the azure net again. He then made a hand seal, and the entire net transformed into a burst of azure light that swept up the 12 rods before drawing them into the golden pouch again. Han Li pointed a finger toward the pouch, and its opening was immediately sealed shut. After that, he stowed the pouch away in his storage bracelet, then cast his gaze toward the golden scroll that was hovering in midair. He reached out and gently waved a hand, and the scroll was drawn into his grasp. It was slightly cool to the touch, but it had the texture of soft fabric. Blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes as he carefully inspected the scroll inch by inch at close range, and after a while, his brows furrowed slightly. This scroll appeared to have no openings at all to exploit, and even through the use of his bright-sight spirit eye's ability, he was only greeted by the sight of nothing more than golden light, and he was completely unable to see into it. He took a deep breath before releasing his enormous spiritual sense, and a wisp of it instantly surged toward the scroll. However, in the next instant, he abruptly flicked his wrist, and the scroll was hurled around 10 feet away. In the instant that his spiritual sense had made contact with the scroll, a burst of powerful suction force had erupted from it, and devoured that wisp of spiritual sense in the blink of an eye. The suction force then attempted to move on to the rest of his spiritual sense, and if he hadn't reacted as quickly as he did, he would have most likely lost more than just the wisp of spiritual sense he had released. Han Li stared at the golden scroll in the distance in a slightly alarmed manner, and after taking a moment to regain his composure, it dawned on him that this thing was going to be very difficult to crack. After a brief moment of contemplation, he suddenly pointed a finger toward the golden scroll, and an azure sword thread instantly shot forth. The sword thread struck the scroll with a crisp clang, and golden light flashed from its surface. The sword thread was completely repelled and kept at bay, and it had failed to even leave the slightest trace on the scroll. Han Li's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. With his current body integration stage powers, in addition to the sharpness of his azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, there weren't many things in the entire spirit realm that his sword threads would fail to slice through. However, this scroll had managed to remain completely unscathed, which suggested that at the very least, it had to have been constructed from some kind of extremely rare material. It was no wonder that the man in the crimson light was so unwilling to part with this scroll even though he had no way of opening it. However, this item couldn't be infiltrated using spiritual sense, and it was clearly near indestructible, so it seemed that its seal truly couldn't be broken through brute force. With that in mind, Han Li focused his gaze on the golden runes that had suddenly appeared on the surface of the scroll. Those were none other than golden seal text runes. However, They had been hiding within the scroll initially, and had only suddenly appeared after being struck by that sword threat of his.